Thursday from 7 p.m.
There was a kind of a Mediterranean side to that as well, because my mother came from that side, you know, a big family. And I think there is that sense of community where family is kind of key. And I think that's really kind of what we sort of try and continue, really. I mean, certainly with children and stuff like that, you know, Sunday lunches were always, you know, the big thing.
Yeah, really. But if you go down the Old Kent Road today...
Very different. Very different, yeah. And that was quite some time ago as well, because we were very close to where the Thomas à Becket was.
Yeah, I know, the boxing upstairs and all the rest of it. Yep.
And I did go down there not so long ago, actually, and it really is very, very different. I mean, I'm not saying that's necessarily bad. I think we have a different view of things.
Most people in London, Nicky, don't even know the names of the next-door neighbours.
No, true.
We've completely lost that sense of community that you grew up with, that you knew. I think it's a real problem.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say sometimes I'm a bit guilty of it where I am now as well. You live in big houses, and I do see my neighbours, but, you know, it's not quite the same as it was back.
And I guess from that background, you were a teenager, you want to become a hairdresser.
Yeah,
that must have been quite a difficult call.
Yeah, that one was a really good call. My dad went, oh, God, what? I mean, it was just very funny. And certainly from the point of view of, you know, this was the early 70s. And so it wasn't really the kind of the choice of most people would do.
No, but you did. Why?
I don't know, actually. I mean, I went to a grammar school and I didn't do as well in the final exams, and I was kind of forced into sort of leaving. And you suddenly go, ooh, no idea what to do here, really. Yeah. But the idea of doing something in fashion, and, you know, I really kind of... I know that I was given some really good advice, actually, by somebody that said, just start at the bottom. Don't necessarily go to, you know, college or whatever. Not, there may not be anything wrong with those, but just start at the bottom, go to the best place you can and start sweeping the floor.
9:30 on Thursday, the 11th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom and GBNews with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
Good morning, thank you for joining us. So Boris has blasted Sunak. Overnight, Boris Johnson has launched a furious attack on the Prime Minister, calling some of his policies mad and saying that he must spend more on defence.
When I look at some of the things that we're doing now, I think that are being done in the name of conservatism, I think they're absolutely nuts.
And he's got more problems because Rishi Sunak is facing revolt from within his own cabinet after threatening to leave the European Court of Human Rights over his Rwanda policy.
And is it time to come clean? The Health Secretary demands to know the fate of 9,000 young people treated at gender clinics. Were they failed by adults in the health service?
And the fake stamp scandal, which was broken here on GB News. We've followed this story throughout, and it seems counterfeit stamps leaving people paying £5 penalties to try to collect their post. Well, thousands of them are coming from, guess where? China.
Members of the public are urging Royal Mail to find and destroy these Chinese knockoffs and stop fining innocent people, or they won't be able to trust stamps again.
We're also going to be debating whether it is time to scrap or reform the NHS. What can we possibly do to save it? Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/your say is the portal, the website, the comment page that we're enjoying so much. I will try and stay concentrated on the show today. First, though, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 9:30. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. A change to family visa rules comes into force today as part of the government's plan to reduce immigration. It's part of the Home Secretary's promise to transform the UK's immigration system, cut unfair levels of migration and ensure those arriving here do not burden the taxpayer. The measure will see the minimum income for family visas rise by more than £10,000 to £29,000, an increase of more than 55%. By early 2025, this will have increased 2 more times, rising to £38,700. A new poll suggests Rishi Sunak and other high-profile Tories could keep their seats because of voter ID confusion in the next general election. A poll by campaign group Best for Britain found 16% of people did not know that they would need a photo ID to vote in the upcoming local and general elections. It means around 5 million could be turned away from polling stations. The government passed the legislation in 2022, with the new rules coming into force last year. Nearly half of workers have spent time looking at jobs outside the NHS, according to new analysis. Researchers found around 47% have looked at employment outside the NHS, with 14% applying for non-NHS jobs between March and June last year. It's understood stress, workload, staff shortages and pay are the top reasons for those leaving the NHS. The study team raised concerns over burnout after almost 1 in 2 workers reported feeling very tired or drained most days or every day. President Joe Biden has promised ironclad support for Israel as he warned Iran not to launch a missile attack. This comes as fears grow that Tehran could retaliate following a strike in Syria that killed major senior Iranians. Israel has denied responsibility for the attack. Mr. Biden said Iran is threatening to launch a significant attack and said the US will do all it can to protect Israel's security. And a once-a-day migraine pill has been recommended on the NHS, with a charity claiming it could change the lives of thousands. The pill, sold under the brand name Equipta, has been given the green light for NHS use under the new final draft guidance. It's understood around 170,000 sufferers will benefit from the treatment. Anyone who experiences at least 4 migraines a day and a month has tried at least 3 other methods but found no relief. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's...
Very good morning. Welcome to Britain's Newsroom on GB News. Very busy.
At least I was sitting down in my seat.
That makes a nice change. Right, overnight, Boris Johnson has launched a furious attack on the Prime Minister. He's called the sale of tobacco to future generations. To stop the sale of tobacco, absolutely not. He said we need to spend more on defence. Let's have a listen to Boris Johnson speaking in Ottawa.
The difference between us Conservatives and our opponents is that every time their instincts are always about control and expropriation and coercion and taking your money and spending it on your behalf and regulating your lives, and we are on the whole in favour of freedom. When I look at some of the things that we're doing now, I think that are being done in the name of conservatism, I think they're absolutely nuts. But, you know, we're banning cigars. And what is... I mean, maybe you all think that's a great idea. I just can't see what is the point of banning... Well, the party of Winston Churchill wants to ban... I mean, donnez-moi un break, as they say in Quebec. You know, it's just mad.
Well, it's quite refreshing to hear him talking about freedom and not banning things.
You know, I mean, good luck. Good. I quite agree with what you're saying because I don't understand this ban. I mean, nobody wants to smoke, but the idea that they're going to ban anyone born after 2009 from buying cigarettes legally, I mean, it's unworkable. And most Tory MPs think it's nuts.
Yeah.
But there is a convention that former Prime Ministers don't criticise the country when they're abroad. And he's personally criticising, not just Rishi Sunak, who's out on the campaign trail today.
He's talking very freely there, wasn't he?
That was classic Boris, wasn't it?
Classic Boris. We'll find out where he was as well. Because the thing is, my suspicion about Boris is he's always talking to his audience, right? He's saying what he thinks...
He's in Ottawa.
He's saying what he thinks the person in the room wants to hear, whether it's an audience of people paying to hear him speak or his current wife at the time. So I have my suspicions that he's maybe just talking based on the context.
Canadian Conservatives. It's the Canada Strong and Free Network, and he was also with the former... Tony Abbott is there, the former Australian Prime Minister.
Yeah.
So he's feeling at home
OK, so he's talking to a Conservative crowd. He's trying to talk the rhetoric of freedom and liberty and personal choice. But he's drawing the distinction between that and this current Conservative government, who seem to not be on board with those sorts of issues.
Yeah, and he's also talking about defence spending because, as you know, in the budget there was absolutely no increase in defence spending. We're arguably facing potentially, some people would say potentially even World War III. But there is the biggest war in Europe in Ukraine and no extra money for defence spending. And that is a source of great tension in the Tory party.
Well, another headache for the Prime Minister. He's going to face a cabinet revolt if he decides to leave the European Court of Human Rights.
These 12 cabinet members are said to oppose leaving, including Jeremy Hunt, James Cleverly and Alex Chalk, the Justice Secretary. Actually, add to that the Foreign Secretary, David Cameron, Lord Cameron. No way will Lord Cameron allow this.
So this debate heated up again after calls from Tory MPs to quit the ECHR following that landmark ruling that governments have adduced to protect people from climate change. That was in Sweden. We just saw the
Switzerland.
Switzerland, thank you. We just saw the footage yesterday. Sam Fowles is with us, our favourite barrister. And Sam, just explain to us, because this ECHR acronym is bandied around a lot. What would it mean for British people if we came out of the ECHR?
Well, it would put us on a diplomatic par with Russia, basically. The European Convention on Human Rights was created by with the leadership of two Conservative politicians, Winston Churchill and David Maxwell Fyfe, who's one of my favourite lawyers of all time. And they saw the dangers of communism, they saw the dangers of what had happened in Europe in the mid-20th century, and they said the only way to stop authoritarianism rising again is to put lines in place where you say to the state, this far can you go, but no further. And to recognise that all individuals have a fundamental, basic value. And so, and that's what the ECHR does. It sets down the fundamental points that protect the basic value of human beings, and says to states, whatever you do, you have to respect people's fundamental personhood.
So if we left, OK, so we're on you say we'll be the same as Russia, and I think Belarus isn't in it as well.
Indeed, yeah.
I think, 44 countries are members. But it's not the place of a European court to meddle in what I would argue is domestic politics. It's a huge overreach. Now, you've read, unlike me, the full 300-page ruling from the ECHR.
For my sins.
And I'm glad that the one judge who dissented was the British one. That's reassuring. But don't you think they've gone too far? Because what's next then? Switzerland hasn't gone far enough in climate change policy. Oh, they need to spend more on defence spending. Is that going to be the next thing?
Well, I think we've got to be really clear that the court didn't go outside what states have already said. The core of the judgment was to recognise that states in the Paris Agreement have seen that publicly recognise that climate change is an existential threat, and each state has made public commitments to cutting emissions, right? And so the court's trying to summarise 300 pages of reasoning in 3 sentences goes like this. The court said, states have recognised that this is an existential threat. It therefore goes to people's fundamental humanity. States have been very clear about what they need to do to combat that. So if states don't live up to what they've said they have to do, then that is a violation of our fundamental rights. So it's not saying the court's going to develop your policies for you. It's not saying we're going to create a new right. It's recognising what states have already said and saying to them, you can't just be all talk, you have to be action.
But hang on, NATO members have a commitment to spend 2.5% of spending of GDP on defence. Are they now going to say that all NATO, to make a ruling about countries in the ECHR within NATO, that they've got to spend that 2.5%?
No, I don't think it would go there.
It's the same principle, though, isn't it?
Well, the protection from environmental harm has long been recognised as a fundamental right. This isn't new. There's sort of 30 years.
Defence of our borders, defence of the realm is a fundamental right.
And indeed, the European Court has protected our right to defence, but it hasn't gone so far as to say you have to comply with NATO guidelines, because NATO is I'm going to say regional, and let me just preface that by saying in the broadest sense, NATO is a regional agreement. The Paris Agreement is a global agreement. And so these are on slightly different levels, because what human rights does, it doesn't look at us as Brits or as Americans or as French or Venezuelans. It looks at us as people. So it's very difficult to say, well, people in this western corner of the world have one set of rights and people elsewhere have a different set of rights. But with the Paris Agreement, that's something that applies to every person in the world. So it's on much firmer footing, I think.
So does it set this case this week? Does it set a bit of a dangerous precedent, though, in terms of courts holding non-elected... Well, the Paris Agreement, OK, that was elected governments coming together for that, but organisations that are determining policy being held to account by courts on the bidding of certain individuals?
Well, this is what public law and public international law does.
This isn't new, though, isn't it? Isn't this a new phenomenon?
An unaccountable court.
Yeah. No, so this... so we can go all the way back to the case of James Madison in the United States, which in I think, 1804, but I might have got that date wrong, so don't quote me.
We won't test.
The late 18th century, early 19th century, a case where it was just made very clear that individuals are entitled to hold governments to account for government's compliance with the law. And that has been the role of domestic public law courts, and it's been the role since the middle of the 20th century of international public law courts.
Well, government's compliance with the law, it isn't law that we have to become net zero in line with the 2030 Agenda Sustainable Goals. It isn't law. Do you see what I mean?
Well, it's international law, because it's recognised in the Paris Agreement. Yeah. And B, it is law that we must protect the rights to a home and private life. And it was... what the court said, and this isn't a new decision either. The court has been saying things like this for years and years and years, just not in the climate change context. It said, if other people can impose climate change upon you, then that's a violation of your right to a private life. Just in the same way that if people can impose sort of pollution from their garden onto you and kind of gas you or something, that's a violation of your private life. It's the same thing. And so...
And no part of that court case would be whether climate change is specifically man-made based on carbon emissions. That is a given.
That is not for that. The court said, look, that's not none of our business. That's something for states to come up with, and states have come up with it.
Right.
And the other point, really important point, was Switzerland was quite open with the court in saying, yes, we get it. We understand that we have not reached the goals that we undertook under Paris. We understand we haven't even really got a plan in place to do that. And the court said, if you had come to us and said, look, we're meeting our goals, here's the evidence, here's the plan, bit of paper, this is what we're going to do, well, then we'd be in a completely different set of circumstances.
I hope Switzerland tell the court to get lost. I hope they tell them to get lost. It's the job of governments to be held to account over law, not unelected judges, 44 judges piously sitting in judgment. I hope the Swedish government says, we're not doing it.
Well, I hope not, because that's exactly what the role of judges is to do.
It's a gift for people in this country who want to leave the European Court of Human Rights. They say it's overstepping the mark, it's overreaching itself. It's the job of governments to decide. It's not the job of a court to make a government do it. It's the voters can kick the government of Switzerland out if they don't like their response to global warming.
Well, the point about public law is it's for the government to decide the law, but once the government has decided the law, it's for the government to stick to that law. You can't have sort of acting willy-nilly once you've decided the law. And this is what the court has said. It hasn't gone in any particular adventurous direction. It's literally said to the Swiss government, this is what you agreed to, now you need to stick to it.
Fascinating.
Like it will make any difference to climate change anyway if Switzerland do or don't net zero. Switzerland, population of what, 1.5 million or something?
That massive polluter.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's what makes the whole thing even more risible.
Thank you, Sam. Brilliantly explained, as always. Sam Fowles there, our favourite barrister. Now, up next, nearly half of NHS workers have spent time looking for jobs outside of the NHS.
But in some slightly positive news, waiting list for routine hospital treatment in England has fallen for the 5th month in a row. But do we need to reform the NHS? We're going to debate that next with Britain's Newsroom.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
The perception of a crime being committed is not based on whether that person intended to commit a crime or not, but whether the victim, in inverted commas, or anybody else for that matter who happened to hear whatever was said, determines that it was motivated by malice or ill will. Most of these things come out in heated exchanges or in, very casual exchanges. And then somebody says, oh, I'm offended or I'm hurt or I'm whatever because this was clearly malicious and it's against me as a black person or a transgender or sexuality, whatever it might be, and somebody says, I perceive this to be motivated by hate. Now, at that point, what is the reasonable test that anybody could apply as to what was in somebody's mind at the time? You don't know what I'm thinking now. I don't know what you're thinking now. Why is it that a crime can be committed on the basis of what somebody is alleged to be thinking?
Well, that's also how discrimination often works, because people have worked out these days that saying something or sending an email like one I received some years ago that said, let's go round her place with pickaxe handles and balaclavas and see what we can do. Now, that's an email that was sent about me. People have worked out that you don't do that. But from the circumstance of what happens, if racial taunts were being shouted, if taunts about someone's protected characteristic were being shouted in the run-up to what then happened, it would be pretty obvious that that was a hate crime.
But we know, for example, that street preachers have been arrested merely for quoting the Bible and without actually intending, anything beyond that.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, this is worrying. Nearly half of NHS workers are now spending time looking for jobs outside the health service, according to some new analysis.
And the Prime Minister says not tackling the huge waiting lists are one of his biggest failures in office.
Although he will cling to this, figures just released show the waiting list for routine hospital treatment, in England at least, has fallen for the 5th month in a row.
So how do we reform the NHS? Joining us now is Senior Clinical Lecturer at University of Exeter Medical School, Bharat Pankani, and Communications Manager at Ladies of Liberty, Jess Gill. Good morning to you both. If I could start with you, Bharat, how do we fix the NHS, and is there any good news?
Oh, the NHS is one of the best in the world if only we would, manage it right and fund it right. So how do you fix it? The first thing is this: medicine costs money. And if you were to invest, and we have not invested in public health preventative measures, then you create fewer patients. Although this preventative action takes about 20 years to grow to fruition, it is the best solution possible, because when you have a healthy population, they go to work, and when they go to work, they pay taxes, and when they pay taxes, they contribute to the exchequer. Therefore, having a healthy population should be very important, and therefore you do your preventative medicine. Going forward, the NHS, most people don't know this, that further to the private finance initiatives, we are bleeding a lot of money to these. We are mortgaged out of existence to these private companies who own the hospital buildings, to whom we have to pay a colossal amount of our money because of those PFI initiatives. And what we can do about what those initiatives are, I don't know. The one other bit that we must do also is, of course, we have this artificial barriers called the purchaser-provider split, which is trusts compete with themselves to provide services. Instead of competing, it is better to work collaboratively. We are not a a chain of supermarkets competing with each other. And therefore, it is better to say we will work together to produce the best for our country, for all the patients all over the country. There are a few more things I would say, but I'll break for now.
Go on, thank you. Jess, what do you think? Where are we at with the NHS?
I'm sorry, but it's absolute nonsense that the NHS is underfunded. The UK, I believe, is the 6th highest healthcare spending out of all the OECD countries. It's consistently rising. This idea that there's this elaborate scheme that the Tories are trying to underfund the NHS to privacy is a conspiracy theory, and it shouldn't be taken seriously. It's an absolute joke.
Look at it yourself. If you look at all the fellow European Union countries, Germany, France,
We're
Italy,
highest
Spain,
out of 32 countries. I think it's an actual...
As a product of GDP, we invest less.
Let Jess finish, Barrett, because you did have your say. Jess, I mean, is he saying that you're wrong? Are we spending more than other countries?
We're the 6th highest out of 32 other countries. It's a product of the system. It's a system that's wrong. I wish that healthcare companies acted like Tesco and Asda. That would actually produce a better product if we treated patients like consumers. I think then we have a healthcare system that prioritises the patients, prioritises the people. You know, during the COVID pandemic, we were told to protect the NHS. Why doesn't our healthcare system protect us? I think we completely need to change our mentality around the NHS because, quite frankly, it's a cult mentality. The NHS needs to be abolished.
Listen, we really want to carry this on, but we've got to take a quick break for the news. If you don't mind, we're just going to ask you to hang on for a minute because we do have to take a news break. And I know the NHS is incredibly important to our viewers. So Alex Burkle, first of all, has the weather. Back in a minute.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Morning, here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Some damp, drizzly weather across southern parts today, but elsewhere it's looking largely dry and pretty warm. Like I said though, across southern parts here there will be outbreaks of drizzly rain, going to be quite grey and a bit dank here. Further north though, lots of fine weather to be had, especially across parts of Scotland, northern England, a decent amount of sunshine, and with the sunshine it is also going to feel pretty warm. Temperatures are likely to be higher than they have been recently. Could see highs of around 20 or 21 Celsius, which would make it the warmest day of the year so far. Later on, as we go through the end of the day and overnight, we are going to see some wet weather spilling its way across parts of Northern Ireland, into parts of North Wales, Northern England and across Scotland too. Some of this wet weather could be pretty heavy, though in the south it is likely to stay mostly dry, albeit pretty cloudy. Because of the cloud, temperatures won't drop much, so it is going to be a mild start to the day tomorrow, most places starting in double figures. As we go through Friday itself then, and a bit of a north-south split across northern parts, there will be further outbreaks of rain. Some of them could be quite persistent, a bit heavy at times, particularly across western parts of Scotland, perhaps northwest England as well. Further south though, largely dry and bright, some decent sunshine, and with that, whilst temperatures might not be quite as high as today, it is still going to be warm, getting into the high teens. A similar picture for many of us on Saturday. I'll see you again soon.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Argyll and Bute, the A82 is closed in both directions between Bridge of Orkney and Tindrim for recovery of a lorry causing delays. And on the A83, traffic's using the old military road at Reston. Be thankful because of poor weather conditions. Now, the A74M in South Lanarkshire is closed southbound from junction 14 at Crawford to 15 at Moffat after an accident causing queues. In Dorset, the A35 is closed each way between the Esso roundabout at Bridport and the A37 at the Monkeys Jump roundabout at Dorchester for repairs after an accident last night. In Cornwall, the A389 is closed each way along Turf Street in Bodmin for an investigation, and Skybus flights to and from the Isles of Scilly are currently on hold because of poor weather conditions. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on. Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, it's 10 o'clock on Thursday, the 11th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with me, Bev Turner, and Andrew Pearce.
Boris blasts Sunak. Overnight, the former Prime Minister has launched a furious attack on his successor but one, calling some of his policies mad and says he's got to spend much more on defence.
When I look at some of the things that we're doing now, I think that are being done in the name of conservatism, I think they're absolutely nuts.
And more trouble for Sunak. He's facing a revolt from his cabinet after threatening to leave the European Court of Human Rights.
Time to come clean. The Health Secretary, Victoria Atkin, is demanding to know the fate of 9,000 young people who were treated at gender clinics. Were they failed by the health service in your view? I think they were.
And this fake stamp scandal is running and running. We followed this story. We broke this story about counterfeit stamps, leaving people paying £5 penalties to collect their post. Well, it turns out that thousands of these stamps are coming to Britain from China.
And members of the public are urging Royal Mail to find and destroy these Chinese knockoffs and stop fining innocent members of the public, or they won't trust Royal Mail again.
Prince Harry's visa application papers have been handed over to a federal judge in the United States. We're all waiting to see now whether they'll be made public. And this is over Harry's application to live in the United States. Did he or didn't he put on his application that he took drugs? Because in that book, Spare, which where he
confessed to using.
He did.
Cannabis, cocaine, mushrooms.
He did, all of that. And even Donald Trump has raised it as an issue. Yeah. So is that doc going to be made public? And of course, if he has fibbed, technically, he could be kicked out. But if he's coming back, please don't bring your wife.
gbnews.com/your say is the place to let us know your thoughts on all of our stories this morning. First, though, the very latest news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 10. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. A change to family visa rules comes into force today as part of the government's plan to reduce immigration. It's part of the Home Secretary's promise to transform the UK's immigration system, cut unfair levels of migration and ensure those arriving here do not burden the taxpayer. The The measure will see the minimum income for family visas rise by more than £10,000 to £29,000, an increase of more than 55%. By early 2025, this will have increased 2 more times, rising to £38,700. Nearly half of workers have spent time looking at jobs outside the NHS, according to new analysis. Researchers have found around 47% have looked at employment outside the NHS, with 14% applying for non-NHS jobs between March and June last year. The study team raised concerns over burnout after almost 1 in 2 workers reported feeling very tired or drained most days or every day. It's understood stress, workload, staff shortages and pay are the top reasons for staff leaving the NHS. Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Hay told GB News Labour would prioritise the NHS if it were in power.
Yes, there's been disputes around pay, but actually the pressure that is on overworked NHS staff and social care staff is really significant. So bringing down those waiting lists to reduce the pressure, we hope would address that retention crisis and encourage people to stay in the NHS. But there's no doubt that too many of the workforce have been overlooked, overworked and under-supported for too long.
Meanwhile, Dr Bashir Mukherjee said the Prime Minister bears some of the blame for the NHS's failure to retain staff.
I think it's very irresponsible of the Prime Minister to pass the blame so overtly when he's trying to retain us as staff. You know, this dispute has been going on for more than a year now, and to say that it's just the junior doctors' fault for the failure of both parties really to come to a agreement, I think it's very irresponsible. It's very disrespectful towards junior doctors. I mean, if you want this workforce to stay in the NHS and uphold the NHS, then this is no way to be speaking off them and to them.
The Royal Mail says it's working to remove counterfeit stamps from circulation after reports of fake ones. It follows calls from GB News for Royal Mail to investigate its system after an investigation. The Telegraph reported China is flooding Britain with counterfeit Royal Mail stamps as small retailers are buying forgeries online. It's understood that the fakes were causing a rise in complaints that stamps bought from legitimate stores were being deemed fraudulent, which can result in a £5 penalty. A man has been charged with the murder of a woman who was killed while pushing her baby in a pram. 25-year-old Habiba Massam has been charged with murder and possession of a bladed article. Kulsuma Atka died after being stabbed in Bradford on Saturday afternoon. Massam is appearing at Bradford Magistrates Court this morning. A woman who was stabbed to death in central London has been named by police. They continue to appeal for information. 27-year-old Kamanan Tayamfatin, known to her friends as Angela, was found inside her home address in a property in Bayswater on Monday morning. A post-mortem examination carried out on Wednesday found the cause of death was sharp force trauma. There has been no arrest and inquiries continue. In other news, a new poll suggests Rishi Sunak and other high-profile Tories could keep their seats because of voter ID confusion in the next general election. A poll by campaign group Best for Britain found 16% of people did not know that they would need a photo ID in the upcoming local and general elections. It means around 5 million could be turned away from polling stations. The government passed the legislation in 2022, with the new rules coming into force last year. And the Met Police will reinvestigate the decision to charge Caroline Flack with assaulting her boyfriend, as new witness evidence may be available. The TV presenter died in February 2020, with the coroner saying she took her own life after discovering she was going to be prosecuted. The Crown Prosecution Service had recommended she only get a caution, but this was overturned after London's Met Police appealed it. Miss Flack's mother has repeatedly criticised how police handled the case. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
10:07, you're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. We're going to go back to that debate on the NHS. Joining us now is the Senior Clinical Lecturer at University of Exeter Medical School, Bharat Pankania, and Communications Manager at Ladies to Liberties, Jess Gill. We left you two arguing about how much money's being spent, but let's move away from the money. It does need reforming, doesn't it, Bharat? The way services are delivered. Even Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, the other day was saying can't carry on the way it is, and he was floating the idea of much more private sector involvement in the delivery of some services.
Okay, let me take that thread up. We can always do better. That doesn't necessarily mean that private competitors are going to be better, because what private competitors do is they cherry pick. They want to do the easy money earner procedures, the endoscopies, the knee replacements, the hip replacements, etc. What they do not want to do, and they will not touch, are the renal transplants, the heart transplants, the ITU, the chronic diseases, the ones that cost a lot of money. So just to say, we've got competition from the private sector, therefore all will be well, is a mistake. It's a huge mistake. And what that does, is it takes money out of the NHS system. So when you are paying the private sector for those knee, hip replacements, etc., that money, which could have gone into the NHS pot, goes out. And therefore, when you want to repair your buildings, you want to have an assistant for blood samples, you want lab assistants, you want radiography, etc., you haven't got that money. So it is a misnomer. The other thing that we must do, is those reforms are important, but the reforms we need a healthier population, and we need to stop wasting money. We do waste a lot of money on management. We waste a lot of money on people, what we would say, commissioning services. It's a paper exercise. Millions and millions of pounds are spent on commissioning, whereas you know that the trust does this, the trust works with other trusts, and you find the best place to deliver that, rather than a commissioner sitting in an office saying, I'm going to buy 100 knee replacements from you.
OK. Jess, what do you make of that? The other thing we've not really brought into this is a lot of money that seems to be being spent in the NHS at the moment is for new digital systems, technological advancements, and maybe we need more human beings.
Well,
I mean, personally, I think
sorry, let's just let Jess come in. Go on, Jess.
I mean, I think it's best that we let the market decide what is needed. Personally, I think one individual person or a group of people aren't able to decide the entire healthcare system of a country. The issue is centralisation. The issue is bad economic planning. You can't have economic calculation. You can't have a properly efficient allocation of resources when you have a centralised socialist system. And we can look to loads of other different examples around the world. Australia, there's the Nordic models, Germany, all these different countries have different types of healthcare systems, and they perform way better than the NHS. I think, honestly, if you care about people, if you care about patients, if you care about the workers in the NHS, if you care about the taxpayer who is forced to fund this immoral system, then you would want to get rid of the NHS and replace it with something a lot more privatised.
Why is it immoral, Jess?
Yeah.
I think it's immoral to force people to fund a system which they don't have a lot of choice in. Yeah, sure, it might be free at the point of use, but what's the point of it being free at the point of use if no one can use it because the waiting list is so long? I think that's immoral. I think people should have autonomy over their body and autonomy over their healthcare. I think it's immoral to say that you have to fund the system, especially the working class has to fund this system, and they don't have many other options as well. And they have to use their tax money to that, which could go towards private systems, which would serve them, which would treat them as consumers instead of just being a cog on the waiting list. I think that would be a more moral system. I think we should put Nye Bevan up there with the rest of the socialist dictators like Chairman Mao and Stalin, quite frankly.
Go on, Bharat, you're shaking your head vociferously there.
Look, the simple answer is as follows. Poor people die as a result of not receiving healthcare. In America, people are either bankrupted or they die. It's as simple as that, right? Healthcare is one of those things that a civilized nation can provide for its population, and it can provide it pretty well if they put their mind to it. I would like to take part in reforming the NHS. I feel we've had several secretaries of state who haven't had a handle on health and healthcare matters, and they've fiddled. And things started to go drastically wrong when we did all these PFIs, and then we had the Andrew Lonsley reforms, which has decimated public health. And I tell you, public health is the one that creates fewer patients. And if you've got fewer patients, then your money goes further. We've got the PFI fiasco, and I don't know how you would get out of it. So there are a lot of things you can do. You were mentioning IT. Well, of course, we need IT to help us, not overtake us. Unfortunately, with mega IT projects in the NHS, there have been failures. And of course, we mustn't have another IT failure. So we had Fujitsu working on IT systems for the UK, and they wasted billions of pounds, and then the project was scrapped. It's that sort of waste that we should, of course, reform and not spend.
And you probably agree with that, Jess, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should try and make use of the taxpayers' money as efficient. Can I quickly respond on the American thing? Because for one, I'm not advocating for an American system. There are plenty of other examples, like I mentioned, with the Nordic model, for example. But to the issue with the American system is actually like government regulation, like the American Medical Association and the FDA lobbying the government, making it unaffordable for consumers. Again, the issue goes to the free markets. And I think if you genuinely care about people, you would be for free market healthcare.
So, Bharat, you obviously don't care about people because you think this should be partly taxpayer funded.
It's the most efficient way to look after the majority of the population, the National Health Service. It does a great job. There's one other item I would like to share with you, is this. There is a disconnect between our hospital sector and our healthcare sector in the community, i.e. care homes. A huge disconnect. And we pay a lot of money, or people pay a lot of money to care homes to look after their frail and elderly parents, etc. Now, we need to address this elephant in the room, which is that care home sector is privately run, and it is a law unto itself. So if they don't want to readmit a patient stays in the hospital. The patient stays in the hospital, the bed is blocked. The bed is blocked, we can't do your knee, hip replacement, etc. And therein is a huge problem of discharges. And that can be addressed very quickly if you put your mind to it, if you've got a handle on what the issues are.
And it very much seems that those in power subsequently over many decades don't seem to have had a handle on that. Thank you so much, Ladies of Liberty, Communications Manager Jess Gill and Senior Lecturer at the University of Exeter Medical School, Bharat Pankhania. Thank you for your extra time as well this morning, both of you.
I would take issue with Jess describing Nara and Bevan, putting Nara Bevan in the same pantheon of hideous people like Stalin and Chairman Mao. He was a very good man.
I love the fact that she comes out swinging, though.
Yeah.
She believes in what she's saying. Right, listen, still to come this morning. Can you guess which former Prime Minister had a secret affair with their Deputy Press Secretary?
I'm going to give them a clue. It's not Theresa May.
We'll reveal that in just a moment. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Can the Church of England not spend their money as they wish?
The Church of England can do amazing things for this country and for the world, and I'm not sure why it's chosen to focus on this specific issue. You know, one of the causes that I've always thought the Church was very good at were things called almshouses, which were basically houses that would be built on church estates for the needy. Not only did they want to spend £100 million on this fund, that they wanted to spend £1 billion on reparations as well. Well, why not spend 100 million or £1 billion on a new generation of almshouses, as opposed to just helping one group of people black British people, why not just help all people in need?
Alex?
Well, I just don't understand what the Church of England is trying to do. It's on its deathbed.
Congregations have reduced. I mean, deathbed is maybe a little bit...
Well, look, if we look over 20 years, it's dramatically lower than it used to be. And a lot of criticism from actual Christians come from the values that the Church of England are now propagating. And Justin Welby has a lot to answer for because, you know, not only are we seeing in the news there's mass conversion of illegal immigrants to a gay mass system in the UK, but now we're seeing them spending money... And as Albie actually pointed out correctly, in a way that doesn't really benefit broader society, it benefits a very small group of people. So I just don't know where it's going to end. This committee has also said 1 million's not enough. It's 100 million, sorry.
Church commissioners are now hoping for a target of 1 billion.
I mean, it's woke nonsense, isn't it?
You could make the argument that this is charity. Justin Welby's job is to be a virtue signaller, is it not?
Should charity discriminate? I mean, that's what he's saying. We're only going to give this to people from a specific skin colour or background. I don't think that's very Christian of them.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Is 10:19 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearson, Bev Turner. The panel's here. That was Karen Malone talking. That's
what I'm here for, isn't it?
And also commentator Nikki Hodgson.
Morning.
What is she like?
She's just a professional. She always wants to chat. That's what you need.
I'm just looking at... We've got to show Nikki's trainers. These trainers...
I have to put my shoe above the table. It's getting racy, this show.
Look at them trainers. They're just unbelievable.
Thank you.
If you're listening on the radio, she's got a lovely orange dress on with these massive, bright...
So a bit of Spice Girl, I think.
Trainers.
I'm not sure pink goes with orange.
Well, it does now, apparently.
Right.
It's the new...
She's the trendsetter.
OK.
Come on, sort yourself.
New combo.
Should we talk about something that's in the papers?
Yeah.
Right. What do you want to talk about first? We want to talk about the cast review, Carol.
Yeah. Do you know what? I mean, yesterday I was shocked to my bones all day, and then today it's even worse because now we find out that 6 out of 7 doctors and clinicians at these private clinics refused to cooperate.
Some of these are NHS clinics.
Some of them,
What are they hiding?
Some of them are private, some of them are NHS. Refused to cooperate with Hilary Cass. Now, this is astonishing. Now, why are they doing that? Is it because they know the damage they're causing to kids, and are they trying to hide that? Because that would be the only excuse for them not to cooperate. But this is a damning report. I mean, Hilary Cass said yesterday that the steep rise in gender reassignment was driven not by science but by ideology, which is shocking to me. And I just think, and watching the left yesterday and today backpedaling like crazy. These were the ones who were all in favour of these clinics and saying these were all disturbed, upset kids and they needed to be given the freedom and their rights were being, what's the word, eroded by them not being allowed to change sex. It's all nonsense now. And now that the NHS have said that 9,000 patients referred from child clinics to adult clinics, we've now got to find out what's happened to them because lives wrecked, bones wrecked, bodies wrecked, minds wrecked.
I think there should be criminal prosecution.
Well, it's funny because somebody suggested that in the paper today, and they said that all of these clinicians that were driven by this ideology and who refused to cooperate, the government should step in and do something about it. Now, I don't know whether that means prosecution, but what it should mean is that they never are allowed near kids ever again in their life.
Children have been physically and mentally harmed by taking these drugs.
Yeah, I mean...
And the class is clear. They didn't know the consequences and the side effects of these drugs. She's absolutely clear that they didn't know that. So why were these doctors permitted to do it? They should face criminal prosecutions or investigation.
Right. I mean, their argument would be that in certain other... Maybe when you're dealing with things like childhood leukemia or something, you have to do kind of experimental treatment sometimes.
This is why they won't cooperate.
So these kids are like...
the drug companies don't want... because they are being experimented
Absolutely,
upon.
and they'll be sued for it. I mean, I think what's really damning about this report is also something that was never interrogated, which is why do all these kids want to transition? Why do a majority of girls want to transition to being boys? Because it used to be the other way around, and it's gone up, you know, a sort of thousandfold. And the reasons are they're various, but they're to do with social media, they're to do with misogyny in society, they're to do with little girls thinking it might just be easier if I was a boy.
And peer pressure.
And peer pressure. And there's lots about the effect of peers and also the influence of social media influencers who are not medically trained, have got no proper knowledge, who are actually promoting ideology, whether you agree with it or not. They should not be a source of information for young people, a primary source of information.
Yeah, but it is, and that's
we have to remember who Hilary Cass is. She's the former president of the Royal College of Paediatricians.
Yes.
She is an expert in her field.
And you know what I thought about that report yesterday? I thought she could have been much more damning. I thought her report was very considered, very measured, and it was clever in its way because it meant that the Stonewalls and the mermaids couldn't come crashing back on her and accuse her of, you know, whatever. But I didn't. But, you know, also, we've got to look at... She was being intimidated as well for the 4 years that she was doing this report.
We just want to interrupt you, ladies, just for a moment, because we want to talk to a guest down the line, that Sharon Davies... normally we talk to Sharon Davies about the transition. We might get... in fact, Sharon, if you're there with us, let's get a quick question with you on this. But I know you're here to talk about this astonishing news in the papers today, that Olympic athletes are going to get money prizes in track and field. But we can't have you here on the day after the Cass review without, very quickly, if you don't mind, your thoughts on the Cass review. You must feel very vindicated in some ways in terms of your position of the last few years.
Yeah, and Bev, to be honest with you, horrified it's taken this long for it to come out. You know, well done to you guys who've been highlighting it for such a long time. This evidence isn't new. It's been there for a long, long time. Lots of children could have been saved the horrors of medical intervention. It's been a very difficult topic to get just listened to, you know, in a rational, respectful debate. And obviously then that reflects straight into sport as well. You know, we've been fighting to just try to get fair sport for females, and that's really my area of expertise. I've now been battling with that for over 9 years, since 2015. And I'm just about to go off and see the sports minister today. So I'm hopeful that we can actually protect the female category in sport as well.
Good. Well, talking of fairness in sport, Sharon, front page of the paper today, but getting very little coverage. So track and field athletes at the Paris Olympic Games will be given £40,000 for a gold medal. You swam in a time where this was unimaginable. Where's Carol Malone going? OK, Carol Malone's just left the studio. I'm very sorry about that, Sharon.
She could have gone the other way, of course. But...
so to just respond to this, does this change the ethos of the Olympic spirit and endeavour for you?
No, not at all. We wouldn't think twice about not paying our footballers to go to the World Cup, or our rugby players to go to the World Cup, or our cricketers to go touring in the West Indies. You know, these are Olympic athletes who are training professionals who really don't get very much money at all compared to the profile on the sporting arena. And I can tell you that the amount of money that the IOC earns from the Olympic Games is in the billions, and a very, very tiny percentage in single figures finds its way back to the athletes. So it's about time that we appreciated our Olympians, whether they're cyclists, whether they're swimmers, whether they're track and field athletes.
Well, that's the point, Sharon, because so far it's just the track and field. So far it's just track and field, and they've taken the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, by surprise with this demand. Do you think if one lot get it, everybody has to have it?
I hope so. I mean, obviously, it comes down to each individual federation. So World Aquatics will look after what's going on in the swimming pool with the diving and synchronized swimming and water polo, etc. You know, and they're a very wealthy organisation and they have very big sponsors. I do think that what we need to do is make sure that it's the IOC money that we tap, that this money just doesn't come from track and field or just come from swimming, you know, because it's the IOC that sells the Olympics and makes an absolute fortune out of it.
Well, interesting. Good for you, Sharon. Didn't expect you to say that, actually, but yeah, all credit to you. Right, great to see you.
Good luck with the Sports Minister.
As always.
Thank you so much.
Right, bye. Carol Malone has snuck back in. Do you know we're on live TV? You're as bad as him.
Do you know what I thought?
You could have gone out the other way.
Sharon was on screen. I thought, oh, I'll just nip out now. And I thought you could. But obviously, you saw me at the back. Sorry.
Sharon Davies thought you thought she was so boring. You ran out.
No, I love Sharon. I was very excited she was on. That's why I started a cough.
Yeah, she's
I
terrific.
got excited because she was going to. Because you know,
right,
talking about this.
But what do you think about the Olympics, by the way? Do you think it's right that the athletes get a £40,000 for winning gold medal? I think it rather defeats the...
Yes, perhaps it does. But I mean, lots of Olympic athletes have other jobs, don't they?
Yeah.
You know, right up until kind of a month before they have to go into that hardcore training. It's very difficult to be a professional athlete. People think that because we hear so much about Premier League footballers and their massive salaries, everyone thinks that if you're a sports person, you're paid really well, and nearly everybody has to have a side hustle of some kind.
So if you're 40,000 winner, then in no time at all, the silver medalist said, "What about me?"
Well, yeah, exactly. I don't see how you can just give money for
bronze.
gold. I don't say you just give money for gold and not silver and bronze.
What do you think, Malone? I know you don't do really sport. We're not really sports people. Do you think they should be paid? I think it's rather sad.
I think no, I don't think it's sad. I think athletes give up a lot to do what they do. You know, I mean, it's not just what they do, kind of. On the day, they're training every day of every week, weekends, late into the evening, and they're not getting paid for that. So I don't know if they should get 50 grand, but I think they should be supported, and a lot of them are supported, of course.
Yeah, of course. My ex-husband had 2 Olympic gold medals. I've only just remembered that.
Yeah.
Maybe you could put an invoice in for it.
That's quite a good sign.
You've blocked him out your mind, Bev.
I know,
he's gone.
retro invoice. But I'm just thinking how that would have affected him training every morning. It probably would have. Would it have put more pressure on him? Yeah, I might have put more pressure on him.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it might be motivating. Do they not get any money at all?
No,
not a penny.
So,
but a lot of them get sponsorship.
But they might have win bonuses.
Yeah.
But that's hard for families, isn't it? Because you never knew where money was coming from.
And do you know what changed everything for athletes, particularly Olympic athletes, was lottery funding.
Yeah,
It was
that's right.
absolutely game-changing. It meant
Transformative.
my brother could go to the Olympics because he got, I don't know, it was something like £18,000 a year as a student and a swimmer. And so that changed everything. But no, often these, especially Olympic sports, they can come away and make almost nothing after committing to represent their
and that's the other thing.
But what happens, though, if you're a cheat? You win gold, you get your £40,000, £50,000, and 6 months later you've cheated. I've spent the money.
But you just have to pay it back. You just have to pay it back
There is
by
that.
bit, don't you?
What?
Like if you don't pay tax, you just pay it back. You get a monthly instalment plan and you pay it back.
I think if you're representing your country, you shouldn't just have to do it for love, because it's a lot of hard work and it's a lot of sacrifice, not just for the athletes themselves, but for their families.
Yeah.
And Sebco's saying the same, who's the head of the International Olympic Committee, and he won gold, didn't he?
Yeah. I guess the thing is, at the moment, an Olympic gold medal for most athletes, depending on the year and depending on the sport, will earn you money in sponsorship deals and appearances and reality shows and everything else.
Probably not if you're in synchronised swimming.
Well, no, and it's only the big stars. You know, the ones who came second, third and fourth, the ones who got silver and bronze, won't make that kind of money. You know?
Right, we were talking about the CAS review just before, and in response to that, we want to read their statement. NHS England will continue to support the newly opened Children and Young People's Gender Services and is bringing forward its review of the adult service specifications.
NHS England will review the use of gender-affirming hormones through a process of updated evidence review and public consultation similar to the rigorous process that was followed to review the use of puberty-suppressing hormones. I think the government's got to go really far, Cameron, and say private clinics are no longer allowed to give these drugs.
They shouldn't be allowed to deal them out at all. But also, these clinics were also putting pressure on NHS doctors to give the drugs out, so they would start the process and then bully these doctors into carrying it on. And it's a disgrace that clinicians employed by the NHS have been allowed to treat kids basically like they're lab rats.
Yeah.
And you know,
that's what it is. That's what it is.
And in decades to come, these. I mean, you read Kira Bell's story, who's now started a movement to help people detransition. That's the other thing the NHS have said, the CAS said, that we have to have a department for them, especially now, kids who have been damaged. What do they do with
Well, it's a huge growth area in the pharmaceutical industry. I'm afraid we've run out of time, Nikki and Carol, for now, but they will be back in about an hour or so. First,
Carol might stay in the studio now.
Well, no, I didn't want to
News headlines with Sophia Wednesday.
Thanks, Bev. It's 10:31. I'm Sophia Wenslet in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. A change to family visa rules comes into force today as part of the government's plan to reduce immigration. It's part of the Home Secretary's promise to transform the UK's immigration system, cut unfair levels of migration and ensure those arriving here do not burden the taxpayer. The measure will see the minimum income for family visas rise by more than £10,000 to £29,000, an increase of more than 55%. By early 2025, this will have increased 2 more times, rising to £38,700. A new poll suggests Rishi Sunak and other high-profile Tories could keep their seats because of voter ID confusion in the next general election. A poll by campaign group Best for Britain found 16% of people did not know that they would need to take a photo ID to vote in the upcoming local and general elections. It means around 5 million could be turned away from polling stations. The government passed the legislation in 2022, with the new rules coming into force last year. NHS figures show the waiting list for routine hospital treatment in England has fallen for the 5th month in a row. Over 305,000 people have been waiting more than a year to start routine hospital treatment at the end of February. That's down from 321,000 at the end of January. The government and NHS England have pledged to eliminate all waiting lists of more than a year by March next year. And nearly half of workers have spent time looking at jobs outside the NHS, according to new analysis. Researchers have found around 47% have looked at employment outside the NHS, with 14% applying for non-NHS jobs between March and June last year. It's understood stress, workload, staff shortages and pay are the top reasons for leaving the NHS. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For stunning gold and silver coins you'll always value, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2550 and €1.1688. The price of gold is £1,858.93 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,948 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up next, Scrabble for simpletons. So a former world champion at Scrabble, that is brilliant, isn't it? I'm going to be fangirling them. They're going to be putting us through our paces. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good morning, I'm Russell Holding. In Argyll and Bute, the A82 is closed in both directions between Bridge of Orkney and Tyndrums to recover a lorry involved in an accident earlier, so that causing delays. And on the A83 in Argyll and Bute, traffic's using the old military road at rest and be thankful because of poor weather conditions. Now, the A74M in South Lanarkshire's closed southbound from junction 14 at Crawford to 15 at Moffat after an accident. In Dorset, the A35 is closed each way between the Esso roundabout at Bridport and the A37 at the Monkeys Jump roundabout at Dorchester for repairs after an accident last night. In Cornwall, the A389 is closed each way along Turf Street in Bodmin for an investigation, and Sky bus flights to and from the Isles of Scilly are currently on hold because of poor weather conditions. And that's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Is the brand of toothpaste super important here, or is it more about the toothbrush? Because I was told a long time ago by my dentist, electric toothbrush, Pip, that is the way to go.
You're exactly right. I mean, the action of mechanically removing plaque, so using a brush, is much more effective than the brand of toothpaste itself. But in terms of the ingredient in toothpaste that we're looking for, it's something called fluoride. And fluoride is essential to help remineralize and strengthen our teeth. It's really important to use a toothpaste with fluoride. And in terms of brushing, using an electric toothbrush is just much easier. You know, you're brushing your teeth first thing in the morning, last thing at night. You're going to be a bit tired in those times. So using an electric toothbrush, you just hold it against your tooth and gum and it does all the work for you. So it's just much easier in my opinion.
But you have to use your electric toothbrush properly.
You're exactly right. Yeah, there is a technique of actually brushing your teeth, although it sounds really simple. With an electric toothbrush, you have to hold it against the tooth and the gum. Ideally, you want a pressure sensor in that toothbrush so you know exactly when you're pressing too hard. But if you're using a manual toothbrush, you need to move it around and small circular motions. But actually, what I see is people who use manual toothbrushes, they tend to over scrub and over brush, which can actually lead to gum recession and your enamel thinning long term.
Sometimes I will get up in the morning and I will have breakfast and then I'll brush my teeth. Is that wrong?
Unfortunately, that's wrong. So the best time to brush your teeth is first thing in the morning, as soon as you wake up. If you're brushing after you eat and after breakfast, you're brushing your teeth in that weakened acidic state. So your teeth are actually under attack and they're much more vulnerable.
Very good morning. We are looking at your comments here. You weren't impressed by what Boris Johnson was saying. Howard, Morning Howard says, I can't understand how Boris has the front to moan about anything. He's had his chance and he blew it. He is moaning about Rishi, but it was Boris that gave Rishi the job in the first place. And Jacqueline has said, just ignore the ECHR. Macron does and nothing happens.
Well, that's absolutely my view. It's much easier, much less arduous than because getting out of the ECHR, we can't just walk out. We have to legislate in the Commons and it'll be held up in the House of Lords forever.
Yeah.
So just ignore the rulings we don't like.
Well, Peter said Boris Johnson says he's pro-freedom. He's a liar. It was under his premiership. We were locked in our houses. It was Boris who squandered the largest sum of taxpayers' money in the UK history and has indebted future generations for many decades to come. I think the Boris bubble's burst.
I think it has, and yet he's still got a cadre of supporters who think if he came back, everything would change.
I don't think there's that many of them anymore, though. Anthony, who is a GB News member.
Very good.
Thank you, Anthony. Says Boris doesn't seem very keen on Sunak. Why doesn't he and Farage join Reform UK and help it to become a real force in UK politics and give people a real alternative to the two major parties? And Alistair has said you're reporting that almost 50% of NHS staff have considered a job outside of the NHS. Many of these will have considered agency working, which is outside of the NHS. Such a good point.
Yeah, and better paid.
Yeah, exactly. And, yeah, loads and loads of messages still coming in. Rishi has nothing to lose and everything to gain if he puts leaving the ECHR in the manifesto. They're out of government anyway, so go big or go broke.
Yeah. And a lot of those cabinet ministers who are rebelling against him will lose their seats anyway, Jeremy Hunt being one of them.
Yeah. 2 days on, still talking about the ECHR because Rishi lied through his teeth about leaving it. Why do you fall for these lies every time? I don't think we do fall for the lies, Chris. I think that's a bit harsh. Right, keep your messages coming. gbnews.com/your say. Right.
Were you a Scrabble player, Mr. Chard?
I love Scrabble.
We played it a lot as a family, actually.
THICK. How many points?
I don't know.
16. Well, Scrabble has remained unchanged for the last 75 years. But now a new version of the game is to be released as part of its new inclusivity drive.
Oh, isn't everybody doing inclusivity? It's aimed at those who find the word game too intimidating and have a limited knowledge of the dictionary. Well, that's why you've got to play Scrabble, because it improves your dictionary and it improves your diction.
Right, well, joining us now, someone who is not THICK, is the 2016 World Scrabble champion, Brett Smitherin. Brett, good morning. You're my hero.
Hi, good morning.
Do you just have, like, the most amazing dictionary? I can't even find the word. Vocabulary, thank you. How many words, how many letters is that? Do you just know every word in the English language?
Well, I was quite lucky, and good morning. Thanks for having me. I was quite lucky when I was a kid and I started learning. And I think I first picked up a tile in anger when I was about 16, 17. So I never really played at home with family. But I had a pretty much photographic memory. And I learned most of the 150,000 or so useful words pretty early on. It just stuck, really. So the difficulty for me when I'm playing the game is actually not finding the words. It's then just working out what is the best one to play.
Wow.
So it's slightly different from maybe home play.
And what happened when you won the World Scrabble Champion? Just how does that tournament work?
Yeah, so when I won it, and it was in Lille that year, you have a tournament that runs over 5 days, and effectively it's kind of a league And then the top 8 went through to a quarter-final that was knockout, and then a semi, then obviously a final. And I was lucky enough to win through. Chap you got on the right there, Nigel Richards, one of my kind of key nemesis, I managed to knock out. And then I won the final 3-0 in a best of 5.
Gosh. Well, that's pretty impressive.
Amazing.
Can I ask you, the first of the 3 you won, what was the last word that sealed victory for you? Can you remember?
Yeah, well, there's 2 answers to that. So the word that actually sealed victory wasn't the final play. It was the word bracconid, which is a nasty little wasp that lays its eggs in caterpillars. So when they hatch, they eat the caterpillar from the inside out. But the reason that won halfway through the game was it covered 2 triple word scores. So you multiply it by 9, so it scored me 176.
Gosh.
The actual nail in the coffin, though, I played the word zorinos, which is skunk fur of all things, not a word you use every day. That scored 96. So my final game of the final of the World Championship, I think I scored 638, which is one of the highest competitive scores I'd ever had as well.
Do you get paid to win a Scrabble as the World Scrabble Championship, or do they give you lots of Scrabble boards or something? What's the prize?
Oh, I've got so many Scrabble boards, but no. It doesn't come with a lot of money, and this is one of the big things that I'm kind of pushing for. You know, chess, you win it, you get $1 million.
Yeah.
So I won kind of about 10K, which, you know, for a game that theoretically is accessibly globally, can have billions of players, I think is a little bit low. So I'm working on promoting that.
Well, I think you're very underpaid for that, personally. So this news in the paper today is that there's a new Scrabble board available. Why? What is it?
Yeah, so the idea here, and it's interesting that people have kind of leapt on the dumbing down. Actually, what it is a refiguring of the classic game. So the classic game is still very much there, and I'm very happy for that, because having been ranked in the top 5 in the world for 20 years, I couldn't lose my competitive fix.
Yeah.
But the new version has a team of people competing actually against the mechanics of the game. And people think it's less brutal, but just to be clear, on every move, you have to satisfy a challenge that the game gives you. If at any point you fail, you all lose as a team. So it's instant, sudden death.
What kind of challenge?
So it'll be things like play a 7-letter word. It will be play a word that connects or bridges 2 words already on the board. So the strategy in this version is not about how do I score as much and stop you. It's how do I satisfy a challenge, but how do I make it more likely that you'll be able to do one to keep the team going? I mean, I've actually played it. I really enjoyed it. The only thing is, for me, obviously, it's aimed at families and family time. I think it's great for that. As a world champion, it would be like having Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson on your side in a tug of war. It's not exactly a fair team. But I've play tested it with young families, and actually they find it really accessible. And the great thing is as well, the base set, the challenges come with different levels of difficulty. So you can go from just play a 2-letter word up to, as I say, play a 7, which is much more challenging.
What do you do when you're not playing Scrabble? Do you have a day job?
So I'm a head of people / chief of staff for tech startups in London. But actually, I'm big into board gaming more broadly. And I think, like a lot of people, during COVID, I was kind of looking for things to do. And outside of Scrabble, I discovered board games. And this is another thing, actually. I think that Scrabble together has captured, good Scrabble word, the zeitgeist of modern gaming. I'm seeing a huge number of collaborative games coming to the market, and it's much more popular now. So I think we are seeing a bit of an evolution. But I would say most nights of the week I'm playing some form of game. Maybe not Scrabble, actually. So.
And the trouble is, Brett, you know, you look at teenagers now and young kids, and they only want to play stuff on a screen. They don't want to sit around a board, and we have to encourage that.
Do. Are you allowed to enter the World Championship again? Or if you've won it once, that's it?
Absolutely. I keep going back. I narrowly missed out last time. I will play again. And I'm ranked world number 3 currently, so I've got to get myself back to my rightful position.
We want you to win.
Brilliant.
We want you to. You see what these Olympians are going to get? They're going to get £40,000 if they win track and field Olympics. So perhaps we should get you up to 40,000, Brett.
I did a whole campaign to make Scrabble a sport. I mean, chess is classified as a sport in most countries in the world, so why shouldn't Scrabble be?
Yeah, good for you. Good for you. Thank you so much for joining us. 2016 World Scrabble Champion. Wordsmith Brett Smitheram there. I've got one of those wooden ones, a Scrabble that you like. It's like a lazy Susan. It spins around like that. Oh, it's very popular.
Honestly, it was a good, fun family game. I could see it on the kitchen table. All of us would play.
Yeah.
My mum got a bit cross with us, though, if we took too long.
Oh.
Come on, for sake.
I know how she feels.
Yeah.
Should we go to a break? Can you guess which former Prime Minister had a secret affair with their deputy press
You know who they're all going to
secretary?
think?
You're going to think it's Boris, right?
Yes, maybe he did. But that's not the one. That's the one. That's not the name we're going to bring you. And it isn't Theresa May.
Morning, here's your latest GB News weather update brought to you by the Met Office. Some damp, drizzly weather across southern parts today, but elsewhere it's looking largely dry and pretty warm. Like I said though, across southern parts here there will be outbreaks of drizzly rain, going to be quite grey and a bit dank here. Further north though, lots of fine weather to be had, especially across parts of Scotland, northern England, a decent amount of sunshine, and with the sunshine it is also going to feel pretty warm. Temperatures are likely to be higher than they have been recently. Could see highs of around 20 or 21 Celsius, which would make it the warmest day of the year so far. Later on, as we go through the end of the day and overnight, we are going to see some wet weather spilling its way across parts of Northern Ireland, into parts of North Wales, Northern England and across Scotland too. Some of this wet weather could be pretty heavy, though in the south it is likely to stay mostly dry, albeit pretty cloudy. Because of the cloud, temperatures won't drop much, so it is going to be a mild start to the day tomorrow, most places starting in double figures. As we go through Friday itself then, and a bit of a north-south split across northern parts, there will be further outbreaks of rain. Some of them could be quite persistent, a bit heavy at times, particularly across western parts of Scotland, perhaps northwest England as well. Further south though, largely dry and bright, some decent sunshine, and with that, whilst temperatures might not be quite as high as today, it is still going to be warm, getting into the high teens. A similar picture for many of us on Saturday. I'll see you again soon.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We're just looking at your comments coming in. I've had a message from Jules Taylor. Morning, Jules. And she said, my husband, Ian Taylor, was a bronze and gold Olympic medalist in 1984 and 1998. He was the GB hockey goalkeeper. He worked as a teacher. He had to pay for a supply teacher when he required time off.
Good Lord.
Olympic athletes today receive lots of money from sponsorship and also their sporting organisations. Therefore, I feel no payment should be given. The gold medal should be about the honour of a great achievement.
Sort of where I feel emotionally.
Those days are gone, aren't they?
It feels like
and
it.
We do lose something with losing that. There's no doubt about it. But similarly, wouldn't it be nice if your husband had been given?
Although, if you think about Tom Daley, I think it's terrific, and he won Olympic gold. He's been pretty well paid for a long time, hasn't he, for his sport. He's not competing on the same terms as Jules' husband was.
And actually, the athletes anyway, track and field, do very, very well compared to a lot of other sports.
Because it's the glamour sport.
Yeah. Right.
Now, the Health Secretary, Victoria Atkins, says the NHS must reveal the fate of the 9,000 transgender youngsters who were treated by that controversial Tavistock clinic.
This, of course, follows the Cass review that found that gender clinics had refused to disclose whether transgender people who transitioned as children later changed their minds or went on to suffer serious mental health problems.
And what should happen to those who push the trans agenda in the NHS? And if you read the Cass review, she said there wasn't the proper evidence to justify them inflicting those drugs on these kids.
Still isn't.
Still isn't. But joining us now is the psychotherapist Stella O'Malley. Stella, look, you're the expert here, but my instinct is I feel such harms have been meted out to some of these children. There should potentially be at least a consideration of criminal prosecutions.
Well, certainly any clinicians that continue to push the trans-affirmative approach now that the Cass review is out, I think, yeah, they should be facing criminal prosecutions. Up until now, there was an awful lot of doubt, I think, among a lot of clinicians. However, really from the period between 2019 and 2024, so that's a 5-year period, that period is where I would say clinicians rightfully should not have been part of the gender affirmative approach. There was an outcry when, Marcus Evans, the governor of GIDS and the Tavistock, he left. Dave Bell, the governor, left. 35 clinicians left GIDS in 2019. And they were saying that these children weren't receiving the appropriate treatment. And so any clinicians that stayed beyond 2019, I'd call into question their ability to treat any sort of gender questioning children.
Underpinning this, Stella, is this notion that a child sits down with a psychotherapist like yourself and says they are conflicted about their gender, and the adult in the room believes them and confirms that belief. If a child sat with you as a psychotherapist, let's say 10, 11, 12 years old, and said that, how would you treat that individual?
Well, it's one thing to confirm their belief that they're very distressed about their gender. There's nothing wrong with that. And we would always kind of affirm their distress. We understand that, like, sometimes people get very, very distressed about lots of different things. There's a lot of ways to manifest your distress, and gender is one of them. That doesn't mean that we should immediately put them on a fast track onto a medicalised identity, stop their sexual awakening with puberty blockers, prevent any sexual development with medication like puberty blockers, and presume that they're going to one day medically transition. That's a completely different response to any standard psychotherapeutic response, which is to kind of hasten slowly, cautiously, least invasive approach first, and just explore why are they distressed about their gender? What does gender mean to them? What is it to be a girl?
And
what does that mean to them?
Do you feel that there are people who are born in the wrong body? I was listening to some parents on phone-in stations yesterday saying that their teen was suicidal, was self-harming from being very young, and therefore the parents just want that child to be happy. We just want our kids to be happy, don't we? And therefore they go along with it because they think it's going to make the child happy. Could that child have been born in the wrong body?
We're born in our bodies and we're born as our bodies, and when we die, it's our bodies that die. I don't have any option of any other body, so I can't be born in the wrong body. It's a nice description of a feeling. It's a very good metaphor, but there weren't a range of bodies that I could have been born into. Not unless you're going to believe in something like a soul, that I had some range of bodies. So we are our bodies.
Yeah.
There isn't another body available for you. So, no, I don't think it's a good description. I think it's actually a very confusing description.
Stella,
because people believe
I'm so sorry. The clock has beaten us. We'd love you to come back and talk.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's a much drier and brighter day for many areas of the UK today. It'll also feel quite warm in the sunshine, but if you're across the south coast, you're more likely to see cloudier skies and potentially some rain. That's because of this weather front that sunk southwards through tonight. It's going to linger for southern areas through the day. Much of the rain has pitted away from it, but if you're in southwestern areas, especially across parts of Cornwall, you're more likely to see some drizzly rain through much of the day. Clouds will be a little bit thicker as well, extending to more southeastern areas too. Elsewhere though, it should be a dry and bright day. It's going to feel warm in the sunshine, particularly across the east coast. We could see 20 degrees in parts of Cambridgeshire, for example, but temperatures climbing to the high teens quite widely. Through this evening, rain will return for northwestern areas, pushing into parts of Northern Ireland and then western Scotland. Elsewhere, though, it should stay largely dry, but clouds will thicken through the night. So it's going to be a bit of a dull evening and a dull start to the day, but it's going to be another mild start. Temperatures won't dip much below 10 degrees once again. In the far north of Scotland, you're likely to see a fairly bright start, but elsewhere, as I said, it's likely to be quite cloudy, with rain persisting across this northwestern patch through much of the day. Further south, for central areas of England, parts of Wales, the south coast too, some sunshine will break out, particularly as we head into the afternoon. It may be a little hazy, but it's going to feel warm in that sunshine once again, with temperatures likely climbing to above 20 degrees, which could make it the warmest day of the year so far.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This is your chance to win our biggest prize of the year so far. First, there's a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash for you to spend this summer. Then, we want to send you on a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. Thanks to Variety Cruises, you'll be able to choose from any of their 2025 Greek adventures and discover Greece like never before. And with flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, all you have to do is relax. We'll also give you these terrific travel treats. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 11 a.m. on Thursday, the 11th of April. This is Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So Boris has blasted the Prime Minister. Overnight, Boris Johnson has launched a furious attack on the Prime Minister, calling some of his policies mad and saying that the Tories must spend more on defence.
When I look at some of the things that we're doing now, I think that are being done in the name of conservatism, I think they're absolutely nuts.
And deported foreign criminals, the Home Office, funny that, can't confirm how many convicted foreign nationals were actually issued a deportation order last year.
It's the data nightmare on Marsham Street. We found that the last figures they have are for September of 2022.
And government mutiny in the offing. Rishi Sunak faces a revolt from his cabinet after threatening to leave the European Court of Human Rights over his Rwanda policy.
And sickness claims are soaring. Sickness benefits in Britain rose in every constituency last year. Tory heartland seeing some of the biggest increases. Are we a nation of scroungers? Probably.
And the fake stamp scandal. GB News has followed this story about counterfeit stamps leaving people paying £5 penalties just to collect their post. Well, it turns out that thousands of these stamps are coming to Britain from China. We're going to be talking to the reporter that broke that story here at GB News about the stamps. I think it's quite interesting. Basically, it's counterfeit, knockoff stamps. It's not the Chinese government.
And the people who bought them innocently being fined by the post office.
Yeah. Let us know your thoughts this morning. gbnews.com/your say is the comments page. And you can talk to each other on there as well, which is very pleasant. First, though, your news with Sophia Wensler.
Thanks, Bev. Good morning. It's 2 minutes past 11. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. And some breaking news to start. A man has been remanded in custody after being charged with murdering a woman who was stabbed to death in the city as she walked her baby in a pram. 25-year-old Habiba Massam has been charged with murder and possession of a bladed article. 27-year-old Kulsuma Aktka died after being stabbed in Bradford on Saturday afternoon. She was taken to hospital but died from her injuries. NHS figures show the waiting list for routine hospital treatment in England has fallen for the 5th month in a row. Over 305,000 people have been waiting more than a year to start routine hospital treatment at the end of February. That's down from 321,000 at the end of January. The government and NHS England have pledged to eliminate all waiting lists of more than a year by March next year. And nearly half of workers have spent time looking at jobs outside the NHS. That's according to new analysis. Researchers have found around 47% have looked at employment outside the NHS, with 14% applying for non-NHS jobs between March and June last year. It's understood stress, workload, staff shortages and pay are the top reasons for staff leaving the NHS. Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Hay told GB News that Labour would prioritise the NHS if it were in power.
Yes, there's been disputes around pay, but actually the pressure that is on overworked NHS staff and social care staff is really significant. So bringing down those waiting lists to reduce the pressure, we hope would address that retention crisis and encourage people to stay in the NHS. But there's no doubt that too many of the workforce have been overlooked, overworked and under-supported for too long.
In other news, a change to family visa rules comes into force today as part of the government's plan to reduce immigration. It's part of the Home Secretary's promise to transform the UK's immigration system, cut unfair levels of migration and ensure those arriving here do not burden the taxpayer. The measure will see the minimum income for family visas rise by more than £10,000 to £29,000, an increase of more than 55%. By early 2025, this will have increased 2 more times, rising to £38,700. The Royal Mail says it's working to remove counterfeit stamps from circulation after reports of fake ones. It follows calls from GB News for Royal Mail to investigate its systems after an investigation. The Telegraph reported China is flooding Britain with counterfeit Royal Mail stamps as small retailers are buying forgeries online. It's understood that the fakes were causing a rise in complaints that stamps bought from legitimate stores were being deemed fraudulent, which can result in a £5 penalty. Former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has attacked Rishi Sunak's flagship smoking policy as absolutely nuts as he criticised the state of the Conservative Party at an event in Canada. Under the Prime Minister's plan, anyone who is turning 15 this year or younger, from everyone being able to legally buy tobacco products.
Some of the things that we're doing now, I think, that are being done in the name of conservatism, I think they're absolutely nuts. but you know, we're banning cigars. And what is? I mean, maybe you all think that's a great idea. I just can't see what is the point of banning? Well, the party of Winston Churchill wants to ban. I mean, donnez-moi un break, as they say in Quebec. You know, it's just mad.
And the Met Police will reinvestigate the decision to charge Caroline Flack with assaulting her boyfriend, as new witness evidence may be available. The TV presenter died in February 2020, with the coroner saying she took her own life after discovering she was going to be prosecuted. The Crown Prosecution Service had recommended she only get a caution, but this was overturned after London's Met Police appealed it. Miss Flack's mother has repeatedly criticised how police handled the case. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Andrew and Bev.
It's 11:06 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner. Lots of views coming. Can I talk about these Olympic rewards?
Yes, please do.
Because Sharon Davis, who of course won silver, I think, in swimming, she said she supports the idea of gold medal winners getting £40,000, which is the new plan. PJ says prize money for gold medals. We've come a long way from the ideals when it was reinstated. Julie says, I think Olympic athletes should be given some money for their success. They're being exploited. The philosophy, the Olympic ideal, stems from the rich and privileged public schoolboys of the past who didn't need to worry themselves about money. She's thinking chariots of fire.
And who else has been getting in touch here? Mark said, I was playing playing Scrabble the other day. I was accused of cheating. She picks up the board, threw the board, and the piece is out the window. So now the word is on the street. Very good.
That's funny.
And a lot of you getting in touch about the CAS report. We've been talking about that quite a lot this morning. Yeah, keep your messages coming. On the NHS in crisis, Danny has said, don't be fooled. My partner needed to see a specialist last year. We were told it would take 8 months. We asked for an appointment to be set up, but also looked into a private appointment, which was £304 an hour. We were able to set up within 2 weeks. 3 days after the private appointment, we received a letter from the NHS set for 7 months ahead, but with the same specialist. Don't tell me there isn't a two-tier system.
Wow.
Wow.
Now, overnight, Boris Johnson, he's launched a big attack on the Prime Minister. People talking about that too. He's called the sale of tobacco to future generations, the ban of tobacco to future generations, absolutely nuts, and we need to spend more on defence. Let's listen to him speaking at this conference with Conservative thinkers in Ottawa.
The difference between us Conservatives and our opponents is that every time their instincts are always about control and expropriation and coercion and taking your money and spending it on your behalf and regulating your lives, and we are on the whole in favour of freedom. When I look at some of the things that we're doing now, I think that are being done in the name of conservatism, I think they're absolutely nuts. But you know, we're banning cigars. And what is? I mean, maybe you all think that's a great idea. I just can't see what is the point of banning? Well, the party of Winston Churchill wants to ban. I mean, donnez-moi un break, as they say in Quebec. You know, it's just mad.
He's actually mocking the Prime Minister, isn't he? Because that was one of the flagship policies announced in the Prime Minister's speech at the party conference. I must say I was a bit nonplussed by it. He wants to stop any children from the age of 15 upwards now being able to legally buy cigarettes, based on a similar policy in New Zealand, which, by the way, the New Zealand government has dropped. But that's pretty disrespectful of Rishi. Even if you agree with him, there is this convention that Prime Ministers, when they go abroad, don't run down their own country.
Yeah, our viewers are not impressed, actually, with Boris Johnson talking like that. I think Boris Johnson's doing what Boris Johnson does, which is saying what the people in the room want to hear, and it was a Conservative small C conference. And the idea, you know, he says they're taking up more of your money and not letting you spend it yourself. It is the Conservative government who have given us the highest tax burden.
Yeah, and
in 70 years.
And it didn't just happen on Rishi's watch, did it?
Exactly. Right, now moving on, the Home Office are being as secretive as ever.
They've been unable to confirm how many convicted foreign nationals were issued a deportation order last year, as they said there was a disruption to the data system. How convenient is that? Well, our investigations reporter who broke the story, Charlie Peters, is with us. The Home Office, I mean, talk about, what was it John Reid, the Labour Home Secretary, said in 2006, not fit for purpose? It still isn't.
Well, that was the reaction from Rob Bates, a research director at a think tank that I work with on this story, who did say that not fit for purpose very much sums up the state of the Home Office at the moment, because they aren't able to tell us how many of these deportation orders have been issued. They can say how many people they deported last year. Those figures were released last month. But when you ask the illegal migration minister, Michael Tomlinson, when was the last time you issued deportation orders, they've only got them up to September 2022, which in political terms is yonks ago. Yeah. It's far too long. And this comes at a time when there is, of course, grave concern about how people are tracking foreign national offenders in Britain.
Yeah.
Robert Jenrick, the former migration minister, has said recently that there's insufficient transparency in how the government is doing this. He's calling for an amendment to the criminal justice bill that would require nationality, immigration and visa status to be listed when someone commits a crime. That would give more information towards the gap on deportation and foreign criminals. But to know how many have been deported but not how many have been issued an order does point to a potential, there is a significant gap there.
And what is the position, Charlie? Is every foreign national who commits a crime automatically deported with leave, or does it depend on the severity of the offence?
I don't think it's automatic, and some are released on bail and are given delayed in the process.
And then disappear.
And then that is another concern. I mean, speaking to seniors in the Home Office last night when I had this story firmed up, they said to me that because we've reduced our detention capacity so much, just 2,200 spaces in the country, that means it's getting more and more difficult to remove people quickly, which then invites that legal process. Now, they did also point out that we do actually get rid of some pretty nasty people on a regular basis. Some 17,700 people deported since January 2019. There are regularly escorted removals to countries such as Albania and Jamaica, very typical destinations for these returns. But at the same time, to not know how many of these orders have been issued does point to a gap potentially between the numbers that need to be removed.
Isn't there about 11,000 foreign nationals in our prisons which are bursting at the seams? I don't know why we don't deport all of them when they commit the offence. Kick them out.
Yeah, it's definitely an overrepresentation with regards to the prison population and foreign national offenders. And at the same time as we're reducing the detention capacity to remove people, we're also losing prison population space as well. I mean, the size of the army is shrinking very aggressively. It's now less than the prison population. Prison population's less than 80,000 now.
So they probably do know these figures, Charlie, but they're just not revealing them.
Well, the problem they've said is that when the FOI went in, they said that due to significant disruption to their information management, they're unable to acquire it.
What does that mean?
Well, we do know that last year the Chief Inspector of the Borders did say that there was a major problem with information management. They're going through a disruption. They're changing their systems at the moment. But the Foreign National Offender Returns Command, the team that leads on this, said that there was no single version of the truth on this data. Another staff member told the reporter that they would not be comfortable releasing data to the public. And they also said, thankfully, that's not my job, they said.
Well, but I'm glad to hear that. It's not... I mean, we're entitled to know.
Well, the Home Office tell us that they don't recognise our claims, and they say that data is available, but we've not seen it for 2023.
OK. Well, keep trying, Charlie. Thank you.
Yeah, good story.
Right, still to come, Prince Harry's US visa application papers have been handed over to a federal judge. We're all waiting to see whether they will be made public or not. And why does it matter?
Because when he applied for his visa in the United States, did he include the revelation from his book Spare that he took quite a lot of drugs, illegal drugs, when he was younger? Because if he didn't, that is in breach of US immigration law.
And he might be out. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, you know. And then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different. And they modernised it. And I think, yeah, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first song for Europe, which was, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah. It was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. They just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously, brilliant singing, but the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is, and to this day.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
11:17, you as Britain's News on GB News. Andrew Pearson, Pep Turner, Malone Caramone is back. She says she's not going to walk out the studio this time.
I didn't walk out, I was coughing.
Nikki Hodgson.
I was trying to not make a noise, but instead created a kerfuffle. Sorry.
Not for the first time.
Right, Carol, let's start with this. Ministers threatening to turn on Sunak if he chooses to quit the ECHR.
This is incredible. Yeah, there's something like 12 cabinet ministers, I thought, to oppose us leaving, and there's about 6 want us to stay. And there are, but the latest poll says that more than 50% of Tory voters want us to leave the ECHR.
I'm thinking it's probably more like 75%.
I would think that is the truth of it. But so the Tories here, they have a chance to do something that the electorate wants that may scrape them in at the next election, and they're purposely choosing to ignore the electorate again. They want, and it is astonishing that all this is happening in the week that the ECHR made that ridiculous decision in Switzerland, where a group of ladies called Climate Seniors, backed by Greenpeace, went to the ECHR and said their country wasn't doing enough to protect them against climate change. This is going to be replicated already now.
Greta Thunberg's rubbing her hands with glee.
Well, no, more than that. It's happening. More than 30 countries have now said, backed by her, Thunberg, that their countries are not protecting them. Imagine what it's going to do in terms of immigration. Imagine all the kind of... Because what I didn't realise was that charities and campaign groups account for most of the claims put into the ECHR. It's not governments, it's not individuals, it's these charities and campaign groups.
It's a lobbying exercise. It's a lobbying in terms of ideologies, isn't it, in that case?
And these women in Switzerland were backed by Greenpeace.
Because they're worried that if there's a heat wave, it'll kill them.
Well, that's what they said, yeah. And
do they have a lot of heat waves in Switzerland?
Well, they don't, actually, because I've got family there. And
what do we lose, though, do you think, Nikki, if we do come out of the ECHR? Protections for the individual against any government?
No, but we lose things like protections for workers. I mean, we're very strict about how people can work, under what conditions and how many hours. We lose that, and that will exploit vulnerable people. I'm sorry, it will do. And then there are other things around gender and equal pay and all the rest of it. Yes, we have our own laws.
Have you not noticed we've got a judiciary?
I know, and you've said this to me before, Andrew, and I do see that. But there are two major points made by 2 of the Tory ministers that are worried about it. One is by James Cleverly, saying that if we leave, then we affect international cooperation, which I completely agree with, and I said that last week. And also Tom Tugendhat, who's made the point that actually, if we leave, it undermines the Good Friday Agreement. Now, that's quite serious.
But, Nikki, you cannot have... A judge's job is to uphold the law. It is not to make the law. And what this decision is, in effect, going to do, it's going to allow the judiciary to set government policy. That cannot be the case. That is a massive threat to democracy in this country.
And they're not accountable.
They're not accountable. You know, it is a huge threat to democracy.
I don't even know the name of the British judge.
I don't think anybody does.
Yeah. I mean, that's...
They do wield a huge amount of influence.
A huge amount. We don't even know who it is.
Sure. Well, we could find out as journalists.
But they are power. They've got so much power, and we don't know who they are. And we, as you know, the judge who blocked the Rwanda flight, and the government should have ignored that judge.
Yeah.
We don't even know what nationality that judge is.
But, you know,
or gender.
Well, that's not relevant, really.
It is.
Of course it is.
They make a decision, and they don't even. We're not even allowed to know who said it, so we can challenge them because they can't be challenged. Because there's no appeal.
Basic details about them will give you absolutely no indication of their opinion or where they draw their intellectual beliefs from.
Yeah, but
there isn't a relationship
decision
there.
here. You can appeal it. You can appeal it. You can't appeal the European Court because they're apparently always right.
But you can complain about
this decision in Switzerland cannot be appealed.
Right.
They're supremely accurate. They're so clever, they never get.
But there can be surely another case put in that can counter it.
But yeah, I find it incredible that Sunak has actually said he will now ignore the Strasbourg ruling.
I hope he does.
If they try to block flights to Rwanda. But I actually don't believe that. Do you believe that,
no.
guys? I just don't believe that.
I'm afraid I don't.
I mean, Jeremy Hunt has said last year that it would never happen under a Sunak government. He said he wouldn't do it. So.
Well, also, the other person who won't allow it is David Cameron, Foreign Secretary.
Of course, of course.
Can we talk about foreign aid, Nikki?
Yes.
Go on, what's this story about? Half of foreign aid spent in the UK.
This is quite surprising, isn't it? Look, I mean, foreign aid is actually a very small amount of our spending. It's like, what, 0.5% of GDP? We don't spend very much. And the reason we spend it is because... How much? Sorry, Andrew? It is that, isn't it?
That's too
No,
much.
do you think it's too
No,
much? I don't think it's enough. And the reason being because, actually, if you don't help other countries where people are experiencing famine or war or other catastrophes, then actually you end up with immigration, which you don't want, right? So you kind of have to look after other people. You know, nothing to do with just being a decent human and actually wanting to care about somebody else if it isn't of your country. But what's interesting about this is that actually lots of the money is being spent in Britain because it's going to house asylum seekers. It's going to give them basic essentials and food and some training while they wait. Decisions that never really come from the Home Office.
So we're spending our foreign aid budget here?
Yes. And obviously there's so many problems with that. One of them being that there are lots of countries where they're desperate for help. Yemen, Somalia, those countries have dropped off the radar in terms of us helping them, even reporting on them. And we've kind of forgotten about other countries because we're dealing maybe with so many refugees in this country. I mean, it's important to say, you know, refugees do not receive a lot on an individual basis. They get about £40, 18p a week or something to live on.
Nikki, that's to spend. That's not including their food and their board and their hotel bills and all the rest. So it's not 40 quid. It's hundreds of pounds for every immigrant every day.
Spent on every immigrant, but they don't receive it themselves.
15.4 billion we're spending a year on international.
Yeah.
Far too much.
But the problem is with the Home Office, we haven't processed anybody quickly enough for, you know, eons. We don't let people work.
But that doesn't matter. The point is, you know, you're saying that it's wrong to spend the... You know, maybe they could take the foreign aid that we're spending here off the stuff we send to India and China. That would be good.
But you see, I think public in this country will be happy with our foreign aid budget going towards housing of asylum seekers. Is this another issue that the government just haven't publicised enough? Because we talk about that 11 million quid a day.
That's news to me today. I've never seen this before. I didn't know about it. So, I mean, I don't know if that is... And is it true? I mean, it seems a bizarre thing to me.
It does
seem
you know, bizarre.
But the problem with the foreign aid budget, I mean, there was one particular year, Nikki, when there was £1 billion left in the tin, in the kitty, and they rushed around spending it, showering it like confetti on various
Yes, and that's ridiculous.
That is wicked.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
That money could be spent on pensioners who are struggling with
It could be spent on so many things. That's silly. I completely agree with you. But actually, Andrew, there are so many people in need in other countries that actually it shouldn't even be a question of having anything left over at the end of the year.
Right.
Yeah.
Should we talk about having anything left over at the end of the year when you use your tea bags?
Oh, that's
and how much we can
this
get
is a
out
good
of the
story.
tea bags.
I thought this story would appeal to Piers, and it's
I'm
saying
a great tea drinker,
it's
as
saying
you know.
that it says 1 in 10 in the Sun, but it says 1 in 7 in the Star. Tea drinkers are so skint that they're having to reuse their tea bags. Do you do that?
No.
This is a very depressing story. The cost of living crisis has
I also think it sounds like one of those made-up stories as well.
Well, it is in the Star.
Who did the research on this, I wonder?
Well, let's just have a look.
Is it a tea company?
It'll be a tea company saying... that? Oh, polled by vouchercodes.co.uk. That's who they've done the poll.
The thing is, I'd rather just have fewer cups of tea than reuse a tea bag. I'm Northern. I leave the tea bag in. Terrible dirty
You
habit.
don't?
Yes, but that's a very Yorkshire thing to do. You let it mash.
Oh, use a pot.
Oh, so it's 30 brown by the time... Oh, no.
Well, it depends how much time you've got. You can't use a pot of tea for every cup of tea.
You have to make time.
But if you made a pot of tea, would you put the milk in the cup first or the tea in the cup first?
Oh, the tea, always.
You put the tea in first?
No.
Yeah, see,
yes,
my
not milk first.
partner always puts the tea in first, I always put the milk in
No,
first.
I put the milk in.
I think it's working.
I think we're making the mistake because you can't... If you put too much in this, you can't take it out.
I know I always put a little bit in and then you can add to it.
Well, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I usually put too much in. It's like hot milk.
I once came up with what I thought was absolute genius in lockdown when I had too much time on my hands, clearly, and I decided to make a pot of tea and put the milk in the pot.
Oh. No, that's...
Bear with me.
That's
genius.
savagery.
And then I had some friends round and we're pouring the tea and I said, look, this is amazing. And they're all going, yeah, that's quite clever. Why don't we normally do that? And then my friend came over from next door and she sat down and I said, do you want a cup of tea? She went, yes, black, please. And I thought, well, that's the end of that.
There's two things there. There's that, and there's you were obviously breaking lockdown rules there.
Yeah, well,
Don't get her in.
We all know that.
We don't do snitches on this programme, Malone.
No, I'm joking.
Yeah.
It was obviously during the time when you could have a bubble.
Yeah,
obviously.
exactly.
Can we talk about Angela Rayner? Have we got time or not?
Have we finished with these two now?
No, we've got
oh, no, you're staying here, apparently.
We're going to do a quick thing.
Want to quickly take this?
We've got to listen to this just for a second, Malone.
So this is Shadow Transport Secretary Louise Hay. She's been talking to reporters about the state of the NHS. Here she is.
Most people who have tried to access NHS treatment recently, whether it be accessing a GP appointment or unfortunately having to go to A&E, will not feel that the targets are being met or that the Tories' plan is working. Waiting lists are still 320,000 higher than when Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister. So he's failing on his own metrics. A&E waiting times are higher, as are ambulance waits. Labour have a plan funded by tackling the huge gap in tax avoidance to bring down waiting lists and use the private sector to make sure that we can use that capacity there and quickly bring down waiting lists so people can access the NHS treatment they deserve.
Interesting backdrop talking about the NHS in front of a load of buses.
I know.
How does that
was
work?
a little confusing.
How does that work?
Well, apparently she's currently Shadow Transport Secretary,
yeah.
Louise Hay. She could be the Transport Secretary in 6 months' time or something.
Yeah,
I don't.
Well, maybe
maybe
Health Secretary. Maybe she's got ambitions, and that's the whole reason she's talking about that.
Now they could put the election off to the very last moment, which is about January.
Oh my goodness!
Do you not think
I
we'll do that?
don't think so. No.
Why not?
No. I think he's got any sense. He'll go as soon as possible because I think it could get worse, not better.
Yeah.
No, I said
do you not think the economy
it could be January?
Could get better?
If the small boats keep flooding across the channel, that's going to be a very bad.
The economy could.
Yeah, he's got to wait for the economy.
What about Angela Rayner?
Angela Rayner. Well,
she deputy leader of the Labour
She had a very embarrassing day. I mean, it's not going to go away. And thanks in part to my paper and your paper, who will not let this go.
No,
nor should they let it go, because I'm sick of hearing people saying, well, it was only 1,500 quid if she did dodge it. Well, it doesn't matter whether it was 3 quid, 4 quid, £150,000. It's the principle. You do not break the law. Now, we don't know if she has yet. It's, it's likely to be investigated. But what I found, she was in the North East yesterday. There was a massive demonstration. People had banners saying, Angela Rayner, tax dodger, and she slipped out around the back. But, if she has this evidence to say, she says she has this evidence from her tax people that says it will exonerate her, why are we not
Why
seeing
not publish it? Exactly.
And why have all
Yeah.
the senior people in the Labour Party not read this evidence?
Yeah, and
Starmer
what
hasn't,
about
Reeves
Sue
hasn't.
Gray, who's Starmer's Chief of Staff? Sue Gray, who was Head of Ethics and Propriety in the Civil Service. We've heard nothing from her?
Well, not about this. We've heard plenty from her about other things.
Yeah.
I mean, this is very, very odd. And this could blow up very, very badly for Angela Rayner. This is terrible timing for the election, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, this could be the end of her, actually. This could be, depending on what the results are. But I agree, if she's got the evidence that she's done nothing wrong, she really needs to show it.
And her shtick, Nikki, is that she's a direct, speaks from the hip, tells it
and
as
she's
it
all about
is.
the working people and people without very much money, and she wants to raise their standard of living and all the rest of it. And it feels like she has maybe, pulled a few strings or put money somewhere that she shouldn't have put it.
Yeah.
Well,
not good.
She strenuously denies this idea that she's a tax dodger, doesn't she? And I wonder, Carol, as well, with some people might actually endear her to them. It makes it clear that she was living in a council house, that she worked really hard, she bought that council house, she was caring for somebody at the time.
That's kind of been blown up by the Mail on Sunday story at the weekend, where they showed photographs of her living clearly in her husband's house, all the furniture, whatever. That was kind of put bang to rights. But it would not be so bad if she had not consistently demanded that certain Tory MPs make their tax affairs public. There's one just come to light today about a Tory MP where she demanded her stuff being, and also the fact that she hammered Rishi Sunak's wife. So if she's doing that to the Tories, you know, she said last week that, you know, my tax affairs are my business. How can she possibly get away with saying that?
You can't believe that.
You can't if you're an MP.
It's hypocrisy anyway, isn't it? Demanding it of one person and not really.
But it's interesting. A lot of people sticking up for her, and Pierce has just pointed this out. That a lot of the people sticking up for her are saying that she wasn't an MP at the time, but she was an MP 3 months later. She was campaigning to be an MP when this is alleged to
She sold that house in March 2015. She was an MP in the middle of May 2015.
So she shouldn't have been doing it. It sounds like she'll get off on a technicality that actually the dates aligned in such a way, but actually her intention was to be an MP. So
Ladies, Nikki, Carol, it's never long enough. We've got to go to Sophia. She's waiting very patiently to give us the headlines.
Thanks, Bev. It's 11:31. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB Newsroom. Your headlines. A man has been remanded in custody after being charged with murdering a woman who was stabbed to death in the city as she walked her baby in a pram. 25-year-old Habibur Massam stood in the glass-fronted dock. As he was told by District Judge Alex Boyd, he will appear again at Bradford Crown Court on Friday. Dressed in a grey sweatshirt and flanked by 3 security guards, he spoke only to confirm his name, date of birth and address during the 6-minute-long hearing. 27-year-old Kulsuma Akka died after being stabbed in Bradford on Saturday afternoon. NHS figures show the waiting list for routine hospital treatment in England has fallen for the 5th month in a row. Over 305,000 people have been waiting for more than a year to start routine hospital treatment at the end of February. That's down from 201,000 at the end of January. The government and NHS England have pledged to eliminate all waiting lists of more than a year by March next year. A change to family visa rules comes into force today as part of the government's plan to reduce immigration. It's part of the Home Secretary's promise to transform the UK's immigration system, cut unfair levels of migration and ensure those arriving here do not burden the taxpayer. The measure will see the minimum income for family visas rise by more than £10,000 to £29,000, an increase of more than 55%. And a new poll suggests Rishi Sunak and other high-profile Tories could keep their seats because of voter ID confusion in the next general election. A poll by campaign group Best for Britain found 16% of people did not know that they would need a photo ID to vote in the upcoming local and general elections. The government passed the legislation in 2022, with the new rules coming into force last year. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
For exclusive, limited edition and rare gold coins that are always newsworthy, Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2536 and €1.1684 euros. The price of gold is £1,863 and 4 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,950 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Up at noon, good afternoon, Britain, with Emily and Tom. Andrew's reading the paper.
No, I'm still
He's
reading the paper. Yesterday he was dancing on stage.
No, I'm fascinated by this story about the Olympics. So and your mate Steve Redgrave, the most successful British Olympian in history, coming on to talk about it.
We're going to talk to him in just a moment.
You will get £40,000 if you win an Olympic gold medal.
He won 5.
If you're on track or field, but if you're a synchronised swimmer,
or a rower,
it's not
fair, is it?
Well, I don't think so.
It's not particularly.
People forget the Olympics comes every 4 years.
Yeah.
You train for 4 years for this. Did you say £40,000?
Yeah.
Yeah.
£10,000 a year?
Should be
less,
$1 million.
That's less than the minimum wage, Andy.
Yeah. For devoting your life.
Hang on, they do a lot of other. They do a lot of other contests.
But this is a dramatic change.
A dramatic change, but also a pitiful amount of money if you divide it by 4.
It is, if you think about it.
What's special about the track and field then?
Well, track and field have a budget, you see. So this is the
And they're the glamour sports, aren't they?
Athletics Federation.
To be fair, when I went to London 2012 Olympics, the only thing we wanted to see was people running on the track. I didn't get to see the 100 metres, but I was there for Super Saturday.
I was too, Tom.
Were we in the same stadium and we didn't know it?
You'd have been in but you'd have been in the children's section.
Well, I like the rhythmic gymnastics.
Oh,
so there you go. I could watch that all day.
Yeah, I do too.
A little bit of synchronised swimming as well.
Yeah.
It's all fun. But we're going to be talking about
nothing to do with
the NHS because we're going to be hearing from none other than Wes Streeting during our time. We're thinking in, well, not too long now, in about an hour's time, we'll be speaking to him. And we're going to be asking him about the NHS, how he'll deal with it differently, and also how he'd get to grips with the old BMA. Would he do a better job?
Because he says they can't be dictated to by middle-class leftists.
Exactly. What does that mean?
Which he's not one, of course, because he's from a very working-class background.
He is indeed, and also he's been taking on the left within his party, saying we should use more private services within the NHS, saying it shouldn't be some sort of sacred cow that you can't mix and match with this.
I'm absolutely convinced Keir Starmer is pushing him out to say that, to fly the kite to test the water, because he doesn't want to say it himself.
Well, what we do know is that there would be huge pushback, not only from the doctors, the unions, but also from within the party.
Massive.
But also, of course, he's U-turned on this issue of trans women. That's a big question to ask him too.
Yeah, OK, brilliant. That and more with Tom and Emily from Midday. And we're going to be talking to Sir Steve Redgrave in just a moment. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Let's see what you've been saying at home. You're very vexed about these China cyber attacks. Colin says, what the hell is our Secret Service doing? They've only just realised what China's up to. You just couldn't make it up.
We could have told
you. We knew. We're not surprised. So Colin, we agree with you. Quite why it's taken GCHQ or MI6 or whoever it is, MI5. It'd be MI5 to know what's going on.
And Rod has said, thank you, Rod, if you know how you vote, if they know how you vote, coupled with mass data held also on you, do you not believe they can influence your decision-making process in any way? They won't know.
I'm not sure they know how you vote because
that's not on record anyway, is it?
It is not.
And Ken says these are only able to be carried out because of computers, internet, mobile phones, etc. It seems to me that these inventions are ruining our lives and therefore we were much safer and much happier without these inventions. There is a school of thought that would agree with that, Ken, very much so.
I sort of often think it myself, really.
Me too.
The dark web. I mean, how many people have been murdered because of the dark web?
You do wonder as well.
Brianna Jai.
Yeah, you do wonder. I look at my kids' generation and I wonder whether they will grow up and have a complete rejection of all of this and they will just say enough because they will think we were all insane for having become so addicted to our phones. I wonder whether, as a generation after generation do, they will reject it. Wayne, blame Western governments for the rise of China. People were saying this 10 years ago and every country ignored it. That is a really good point, Wayne, because we've taken Chinese investment and obviously our houses are full of items we bought from made in China.
And if you remember as well, we had to get them out of the 5G. Huawei.
We did.
Get them out, literally extricate them from
that was at least one thing I think they did quite well.
Yeah.
And Jan says if they've seen the electoral roll, what else have they been looking at? That's the threat to our democracy. They never do things by halves. I'm much more worried about my own government looking at what I do online, to be fair.
Why don't you say, go back, we said before, the electoral roll is a public document which you can access if you go to your library.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
It's 11:40 with Britain's Newsroom on GB News with Andrew Pearce and Bev Turner.
So, the Royal Mail say that it is working to remove counterfeit stamps from circulation after reports of fake ones.
It follows calls from GB News, who broke this story, for the Royal Mail to investigate its system after investigation. And we are being flooded now, it emerges, with these stamps from China.
So, GB News has been speaking to people in Horsham to hear what they make of this scandal.
Well, it concerns me that the wholesalers, the UK wholesalers, are getting them mixed up in their supplies. That raises some questions as to why that's happening and where they get their stamps from.
It's not good, is it, having fraud going on? And these stamps, all the old people are buying stamps, aren't they? So at the end of the day, they still use their mail. So I'll take it they're getting caught now, aren't they? These stamps are getting caught in the post offices. So, you know, it's not good.
If it's fake, it's terrible. I mean, they're going through a bad time at the moment. So, yeah, I've no idea when it was going to arrive either. I just have to post it and hope.
Well, joining us now is our digital finance editor, Jessica Sheldon, who broke this story similarly earlier this year. What is the update today then, Jessica?
Hello. So this morning we have reports of China allegedly flooding Britain with counterfeit stamps, and then they are passing on these stamps to small retailers who are selling them to customers who are totally unaware. Now, we have some stamps here which were bought from an online marketplace.
Brilliant.
Now, you wouldn't necessarily know there was a problem with them, but when you compare them with some genuine stamps, you start to see that the barcode is flat and the colour's slightly different.
I mean,
who would notice that?
I can't. I've got my glasses on. I can't see any difference. So these are the knockoff ones. So here we go. Where are you? I think you're going to look at me here. So these are the stamps which have been bought online, and they are fake. And these are the real ones, which, I'm sorry, look and feel almost exactly
They're
the
pretty
same.
good fakes, Jessica, aren't they?
They really are. But I think it's also interesting that this has happened. Meanwhile, we also have found problems with genuine stamps bought from reputable places. So last week we broke the story that Royal Mail had admitted that it had deemed a genuine stamp as counterfeit.
Oh.
On BBC Watchdog last night, they also had the story that Royal Mail had admitted one of the stamps they're deemed was genuine. It was counterfeit. They deemed it
to be genuine.
Yeah. So in a letter to the lady who we interviewed, they said that the stamp had been rechecked by their team and confirmed to be genuine. They said that they'd been wrong to apply the surcharge and were very sorry that their actions had failed her on this occasion. And they said that they would investigate the issue.
Because people are getting fined a fiver, aren't they?
Yeah.
If you put a dodgy stamp on the envelope, it's a £5 fine when you receive the letter.
Yeah, so it's a lot of money. It's also causing lots of problems with people not getting their post when they think they will and having to pay the money at the other end.
So people who are buying these online, this might be a really stupid question, Jessica, but are they paying the full price for these as you would a genuine stamp?
I think it varies. I think people are buying them from places they think are reputable, but they're not. And there are some websites online which look very similar to genuine Royal Mail websites, but they are
But this is very bad for the little shopkeeper who's already struggling against big competition, because a lot of people will think, I'm not going to buy my stamps there anymore.
Yes.
And if they go in to buy the stamps there, they buy other stuff too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really worrying. I think it really affects reputation as well. If you think that you're selling a genuine stamp to someone and then it finds out that they're counterfeit, that's really worrying for your business.
And it's very difficult already because people think, oh, I can't be bothered to write a letter, it's so expensive to buy a stamp anyway, and they're just going to put even more people up. Yeah, they'll send a WhatsApp.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, people need their post for all sorts of reasons. It might be to pay bills, it might be to get in contact with someone and all sorts of things.
So is the general sense that the Royal Mail are losing this battle at the moment? Because what kind of resources can you put behind it? Because these could be being printed off in their millions.
Yeah, they could be. I think it's very worrying that some of the stamps that they are finding are genuine. They're deeming them counterfeit. So I think they still need to investigate their systems.
OK, Jessica, thank you so much. In reply, the Royal Mail said we are working hard to remove counterfeit stamps from circulation. We regularly monitor online marketplaces to detect suspicious activity.
We work closely with a number of police forces across the country to apprehend offenders and search premises. In recent cases, we recovered stamps with a retail value of over 250,000. That's serious business.
Right, don't go anywhere. We're going to be speaking to the rowing legend, Olympic legend, Sir Steve Redgrave. 5 Olympic gold medals at 5 separate Olympics. About this story about Olympians getting prize money. You're with Britain's Newsroom on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's a much drier and brighter day for many areas of the UK today. It'll also feel quite warm in the sunshine, but if you're across the south coast, you're more likely to see cloudier skies and potentially some rain. That's because of this weather front that's sunk southwards through tonight. It's going to linger for southern areas through the day. Much of the rain has pitted away from it, but if you're in southwestern areas, especially across parts of Cornwall, you're more likely to see some drizzly rain through much of the day. Clouds will be a little bit thicker as well, extending to more southeastern areas too. Elsewhere though, it should be a dry and bright day. It's going to feel warm in the sunshine, particularly across the east coast. We could see 20 degrees in parts of Cambridgeshire, for example, but temperatures climbing to the high teens quite widely. Through this evening, rain will return for northwestern areas, pushing into parts of Northern Ireland and then western Scotland. Elsewhere, though, it should stay largely dry, but clouds will thicken through the night. So it's going to be a bit of a dull evening and a dull start to the day, but it's going to be another mild start. Temperatures won't dip much below 10 degrees once again. In the far north of Scotland, you're likely to see a fairly bright start, but elsewhere, as I said, it's likely to be quite cloudy, with rain persisting across this northwestern patch through much of the day. Further south for central areas of England, parts of Wales, the south coast too, some sunshine will break out, particularly as we head into the afternoon. It may be a little hazy, but it's going to feel warm in that sunshine once again, with temperatures likely climbing to above 20 degrees, which could make it the warmest day of the year so far.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQs live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQs live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threat and so on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Very good morning. It's 11:48 now. Olympic gold medalists in track and field will receive prize money for the first time in a landmark decision.
World Athletics is going to award $40,000 to individual Olympic champions during this summer's Paris Games, which start in August. Well, no, in July, I think.
Yeah, that's right, end of July. So let's bring in 5 times Olympic gold medalist, greatest Olympian ever, Sir Steve Redgrave joins us now. Morning, Steve. Great to see you.
Good morning.
This took us by surprise a little bit, Andrew and I, this story when we were flicking through the papers this morning, because it feels at odds with the Olympic ethos of performance and victory for its own sake, as opposed to monetary gain. But do we just sound a little old-fashioned in that attitude?
Maybe a little bit old-fashioned in some ways, because that athletes that are training for the Olympics across all the sports are training professionally. Some of them do not get paid for doing that, as the era that I came through. But they are training full-time. They are the sort of the entertainment of elements of the Olympic Games, of the face of the Games. But I was surprised by athletics taking this move. It's taking it to a different step. But the problem is that most of the other sports won't be able to follow this. So the figurehead of the Olympic Games, of all the sports, is athletics. They are the sort of the pinnacle of all the sport. but a sport like mine of rowing or some of the combat sports just won't be able to afford to do the same thing. I would prefer that money to be of put into more of the development of the sport, of maybe of other poorer nations within athletics, of being able to enhance them. But giving money to the gold medalist, and I think what they're saying is in 4 years' time in LA, that there will be of money for silver and bronze.
Yeah.
Athletics is so high profile that if you are good enough and lucky enough to win a gold medal or medals in future within athletics, you're probably going to be able to earn endorsements, prize money, appearance money. You're going to get that anyway. It's the image on the other sports in some ways. I remember back in Barcelona when the professional basketball players were introduced. And I was a little bit sort of taken back from that. But they didn't get paid to coming to the games. Multi-millionaires from their sport were doing it, but they didn't get paid to going to the Olympic Games.
It's tough, isn't it, Steve? Because think of somebody like you, what you had to put yourself through day in, day out to win your Olympic gold medal. This is going to create a two-tier Olympics because it's saying the guy who won the 400 metres gold medal or the woman who won the 400 metres running gold medal deserves it more than you did, and you would have worked hard, or just as hard as they did.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right. It's that separation of what there's 28 to 32 Olympic sports now, and we've always been on the same level footing, and this sort of makes a difference. But then you're giving the money to the people that are probably more capable of earning the money in any other sport within the Olympic process, and that just doesn't seem fair.
Because you're right, Steve, I hadn't thought about that. Like you say, when the basketball players came in, some of those were NBA players in America on eye-watering figures. And I think in tennis is similar, actually.
Andy Murray.
We have the professional tennis players who do the circuit all year round, make millions of pounds. And I always loved the fact that they would turn up for the Olympics because it was about the recognition and the achievement rather than the money. Do you think the other sports will be under pressure now to follow suit?
Well, certainly the sports that potentially can afford it are the golf, the tennis, of basketball. That's a possibility. When I came to terms with the American Dream Team basketball coming into Barcelona, and I was talking to Matt Pinson about it, and he said they're not getting paid to do this. They're multimillionaires from their sport, but they're coming to try and win something that you've got two of already. At that time, obviously, I went on and won a couple of more times since then because I was greedy. And I would have loved to be paid for doing that.
Would it have made any difference, though? Sorry to interrupt, Steve, but I'm dying to know, would it have made any difference to you? Would you have still got up and got on the Thames down at Leander at 5 o'clock every morning if you had this money? Would it have made any difference?
It would have made the backbanks a little bit more healthy. I came back from Atlanta in the red, struggling to find the finance to be able to do it. So, yes, there are certain sports that are more privileged financially than others. But that's the whole thing about the Olympics, is that you're coming along, everyone's on a level platform from that, and you're making this into a two-tier process of being able to afford. Surely you can do something much better than giving those athletes that are probably earning much more than that already to other sports or of developing your own sport. Let's have a little bit of lateral thinking. This is. For me, it's the wrong direction.
Well, it's great to hear your opinion on it, Steve. Thank you so much for joining us.
The greatest Olympian of all time.
This morning,
what an honour to talk to
Steve Redgrave.
Fascinating. Right. Completely different view to Sharon Davis.
Completely different view, but very interesting. He's a very wise man. Right, go on. Who had an affair when they were Prime Minister?
It wasn't Theresa May. I don't know about Boris Johnson, but it was Harold Wilson, who was the second most successful Labour Prime Minister in history. He had an affair with his Assistant Press Secretary in the 1970s. It's all in the Times today.
All right, here's your weather. Tom and Emily next.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update. It's a much drier and brighter day for many areas of the UK today. It'll also feel quite warm in the sunshine, but if you're across the south coast, you're more likely to see cloudier skies and potentially some rain. That's because of this weather front that's sunk southwards through tonight. It's going to linger for southern areas through the day. Much of the rain has pitted away from it, but if you're in southwestern areas, especially across parts of Cornwall, you're more likely to see some drizzly rain through much of the day. Clouds will be a little bit thicker as well, extending to more southeastern areas too. Elsewhere though, it should be a dry and bright day. It's going to feel warm in the sunshine, particularly across the east coast. We could see 20 degrees in parts of Cambridgeshire, for example, but temperatures climbing to the high teens quite widely. Through this evening, rain will return for northwestern areas, pushing into parts of Northern Ireland and then western Scotland. Elsewhere, though, it should stay largely dry, but clouds will thicken through the night. So it's going to be a bit of a dull evening and a dull start to the day, but it's going to be another mild start. Temperatures won't dip much below 10 degrees once again. In the far north of Scotland, you're likely to see a fairly bright start, but elsewhere, as I said, it's likely to be quite cloudy, with rain persisting across this northwestern patch through much of the day. Further south, for central areas of England, parts of Wales, the south coast too, some sunshine will break out, particularly as we head into the afternoon. It may be a little hazy, but it's going to feel warm in that sunshine once again, with temperatures likely climbing to above 20 degrees, which could make it the warmest day of the year so far.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Variety Cruises have been sailing since 1942, and thanks to them, you could set sail in 2025. You have the chance to win a 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With your flights, meals, drinks and excursions included, you can choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. You'll also win an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash that you can use to make this summer spectacular. We'll also treat you to these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain